Simultaneous Transmigration, unstoppable from the anime Multiverse. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 426 Arena, Why Can Poor People Come Up with Such Ingredients? As soon as Aishiki Megumi's words uttered, they were unanimously echoed by the other members of the Polar Star Dormitory. Meat was indeed a giant in the meat industry, but that didn't mean rare and precious meat ingredients were any less valuable to them. If Nakumi was vying for a prestigious position like the 10 greatest of Tatsuki, her family's provision of such high-quality ingredients would be understandable. But for Nakumi and her family, meat, a food battle with Yukihira Soma was a minor matter. Why would they go out of their way to provide such a high-quality and precious ingredient? Rare ingredients would be fine, but providing an entire calf at once was clearly a bit much for the Miro family, especially since Nakumi had always disregarded Yukihira Soma. Besides the fact that meat was a major player in Nakumi's family, the only person the Polar Star Dormitory could think of who could help Nakumi secure such a rare and precious ingredient so quickly was Arena. After all, Yukihira Soma is fighting for the Rice Bowl Research Society, and Raumai is also Arena's pawn. And while Arena is ranked last among the Tatsuki 10, as a fellow member, obtaining rare ingredients is actually much easier for her than for the others. This is because, in addition to her status as one of the 10, she also possesses the God's Tongue and the title of granddaughter of the Tatsuki commander. With these multiple auras, Arena has countless admirers, and obtaining rare ingredients like the Iron Horse Running Bull, while challenging, is certainly possible. However, Arena's unwavering support proves that she doesn't despise Yukihira Soma as much as she claims. On the contrary, she finds him too difficult to handle, which is why she's providing Raumai with so much help. Swinging the kitchen knife quickly, Raumai relied on her familiarity with meat ingredients and intuition to quickly and accurately cut out the best piece of meat from the Iron Horse Running Bull, and pointed the kitchen knife at Soma Yukihira on the opposite side. Although I can easily win this food battle even with ordinary A5 grade beef, but since Miss Arena wants me to go all out, then I will no longer show mercy. With my own cooking skills for meat ingredients, coupled with this rare and high-end precious ingredient, you'd better prepare to drop out of school as soon as possible. Raumai didn't know why Arena Nakari valued Soma Yukihira so much, but with such a rare ingredient, coupled with her own meat cooking skills, Raumai never thought that she would lose. Although her family is a big player in the meat industry, this is the first time Raumai has fought such a rich battle where she can use all the precious ingredients at will. Miss Arena had already promised her that if she won this Shokugeki, not only would she have her own kitchen, but she would also have the remaining ingredients from the Iron Horse Bullfight at her disposal. Ah, this wonderful texture and aroma of meat, this is something even ordinary A5 beef, the top-grade meat, can't even reach. Meatmai's fingers, like the strokes of a piano, searched for the finest cuts of the Iron Horse Bullfight, cutting and marinating them with skill and experience. Meanwhile, upon seeing the rare Iron Horse Bullfight that Meatmai had unearthed, Soma Yukihira, though outwardly calm, was actually feeling a surge of gratitude. Fortunately, out of caution, he had enlisted the help of his best friend, Seiya. And his childhood friend had been incredibly helpful, bringing along some truly remarkable ingredients. Otherwise, his fate would have been very different. If it were simply a competition of culinary skill, Soma Yukihira wouldn't easily concede defeat, but he had already witnessed the wonders and delicious flavors of rare ingredients over the past few days. Even if he used A5 grade Wagyu beef, the Iron Horse Running Bull that Meatmai had brought out, he wouldn't stand a chance against it, let alone the cheap beef on sale at the supermarket. Bang! With the sound of something heavy dropping on the table, everyone's attention was finally drawn to the ingredients Soma Yukihira had brought out. Even his opponent, Meatmai, was no exception. Under everyone's gaze, the meat, originally wrapped in a lotus leaf, slowly unfolded. As Soma Yukihira slowly unfolded the leaf, a steak emitting a white chill, its flesh as translucent as a gem, appeared. Oh, this is incredible, this is incredible. After Mito-san brought out the rare ingredient, the Iron Horse Running Bull, Yukihira-san's meat seems to be quite astonishing as well. The students at Tatsuki were all chefs, and even a fool could see that the meat Soma Yukihira had brought out was of exceptional quality, and clearly no ordinary item. After all, ordinary beef itself exuded an astonishing chill. Due to the fairness of food battles, Kawashima, as the host, quickly learned from Tadakoro Megumi the origins of the ingredients in Soma Yukihira's hand, and excitedly said with a microphone, "It's really amazing. I didn't expect that the meat ingredients that Yukihira-san brought out are also extremely rare and precious ingredients. Although the quantity is not large, it is actually a super high-grade beef ingredient that is rarer than Miro's iron horse, running bull. Frozen bison, this is a herd beast that lives in the ice hell of the food world. Because it is good at launching group assault attacks, it is extremely dangerous. Its capture level is as high as level 11. Because it lives on the ice field, the meat of frozen bison has accumulated rich fat. Not only is the meat tender and delicious, but even when cooked until fully cooked, it will retain a hint of cool taste." When they heard Kawashima's introduction, all the audience present, including Meat May, who was Soma Yukihira's opponent, and Arena and Secretary Coco, who were watching the game in the VIP room and entering the loading state, were all shocked. Setting aside the meat charmer's lack of knowledge of Yukihira Soma's background, Arena's expression was filled with disbelief as she watched him prepare the frozen bison meat. Arena knew full well that Yukihira Soma's family ran a regular restaurant, and even getting regular A5 grade beef was a real steal. But now, not only had he secured a rare and exceptional figure, but also a premium cut of frozen bison. Capturing a frozen bison at level 11 is considered a rare and premium cut, even among the rarest of ingredients. Putting aside the inherent dangers of frozen bison, the icy hell they inhabit regularly experiences temperatures nearing 100 degrees below zero, a veritable no-go zone for ordinary humans. To be frank, even for Arena, obtaining frozen bison meat was a tall order, and yet, Yukihira Soma, a family owner of a regular restaurant, had not only managed to secure it, but such a massive chunk. That's impossible. Someone must have helped him. Who is it? Grandpa. Chapter 427 Arena, who has always been paying attention to Seiya. Miss Arena, look over there. That's Soma Yukihira's roommate who's been living in Polar Star dorm with him. Hearing the reminder from Niido Hisako beside her, Arena turned her gaze towards the Polar Star dorm where the others were sitting. Both Sakuki Ryako and Yoshino Yuki were former students of Tatsuki Academy's 92nd class, having advanced from Tatsuki Junior High to Senior High, so Arena naturally knew them. As her gaze scanned the Polar Star dorm, finally settling on a dark-haired young man, Arena frowned. So that's what's going on. He must have helped Soma Yukihira get the rare ingredients, after all. Damn. How nosy. Arena and Hisako were clearly equally impressed by Winner and Seiya's appearance among the Polar Star dorm. That day, it was the first time Arena felt the power and pressure of someone her own age. After returning from the Wenrin restaurant that day, Arena had been trying to treat Seiya as an imaginary enemy, and kept making egg dishes and sashimi dishes, comparing them with Seiya's previous 3 no-stick and fierce iced taima. But what made her extremely unwilling was that no matter how many times she tried, under the taste of her god's tongue, the dishes she made were far inferior to the level that Seiya had shown at that time. It was also for this reason that although Seiya was not in Tatsuki, Arena had people secretly watching Seiya and collecting information about him, so that she could let Hisako handle it and hand it over to her later. Is Arena interested in Seiya? No. Arena did this just to know Seiya's every move and observe how Seiya practiced his current skills in a popular restaurant. Arena is not only gifted, having been born with the unique gift of the god's tongue, but also, having been raised in the Nakari household, she received extensive training from a young age. Even at a young age, she could taste salt from various regions. As the saying goes, knowing yourself and your enemy ensures victory in 100 battles. Arena's interest in Seiya stems from her viewing him as a formidable rival, and she's eager to observe his training. However, Arena's surprise came one day when she and Hisako were invited to a restaurant for a tasting. After making a detour to see if Seiya's culinary skills had improved, they discovered that the Wenrin restaurant, which had previously been packed with long lines, had closed. After some inquiries, Arena learned that Seiya had gone out with a busted waitress to buy ingredients. As for what they were, Arena could easily guess with her breasts. After all, her grandfather had just told him about the rare ingredients, and yet, Seiya's restaurant had been closed for the past few days. Arena had never been to the camp or the trading guild where they bought rare ingredients, but she had heard from her grandfather how dangerous it was. When she learned that Seiya had gone to the camp with only Minazuki, she reported the situation to her grandfather. Of course, Irina wasn't worried about Seiya's safety, so she asked her grandfather to use Tatsuki's power to have the trading guild at the camp take extra care of him. She felt it would be a shame to see someone her age finally find a rival die in the mountains. For the next few days, Irina kept an eye on Seiya, but sadly, after more than a week at the camp, he still hadn't returned to Tokyo. Not only had he not returned, but Irina even heard that Seiya had taken that busty waitress into the perilous world of gourmet food. What was that? It was a mysterious world even more dangerous than the camp itself. You're a chef, you're not cooking properly, and you're going on a gourmet hunting trip. It would have been fine if you had just ventured into the food world, but you at least hired a few experienced food hunters to lead the way, but you ended up bringing a freak of a woman with you. Irina, who had learned about Seiya's suicidal behavior, was speechless. She could understand a chef's pursuit of the finest ingredients, but she couldn't understand such suicidal behavior. After Seiya completely disappeared from the food world, Irina felt a sense of regret that a culinary genius she had even slightly admired was so short-lived. Due to information lags, Irina still didn't know about the commotion Seiya had caused in the camp. So, she didn't know Seiya had returned to Tokyo or even come to Tatsuki, so she was so surprised to see him sitting among the crowd in the Polar Star dormitory. It was impossible for Yukihira-sama to obtain such rare ingredients, and since Seiya had appeared in Tatsuki, it could only mean that the frozen bison was brought back from the camp by that guy Seiya. As Irina continued to grit her teeth, Naomi and Yukihira-sama on the stage also completed their own rice bowl dishes, and the entire food battle came to the most exciting part of the judges' scoring. Although the meat quality and rarity of the iron horse running buffalo were slightly inferior to the frozen bison as a rare ingredient, Irina believed that Naomi still had a chance of winning. After all, for experts in cooking meat ingredients, the gap in ingredients can be completely compensated by skills. However, soon after the three judges tasted Naomi and Yukihira-sama's rice bowl dishes respectively, after some discussion, they finally announced Yukihira-sama's victory. Faced with this result, Naomi, who was unacceptable, quickly raised an objection, and Yukihira-sama, who had been prepared, also brought out a spare rice bowl for Naomi to taste. Onions, red wine, and the unique, impeccable taste of frozen bison, as far as meat dishes go, are truly delicious. But even so, I don't think my meat tastes any worse than yours. After tasting the meat on Yukihira-sama's rice bowl, Ramai acknowledged Yukihira-sama's skill, but she felt her own meat should be just as delicious. Theoretically, their dishes were equally good, and using lower-grade ingredients, she should have been the winner. So why did the judges keep voting for Yukihira-sama? Hearing Ramai's words, Irina, accompanied by her secretary, arrived on stage and used her chopsticks to pick up the steak from Yukihira-sama's bowl. She then tasted the meat on Ramai's rice bowl and found it to be just as Ramai had predicted. However, when Irina saw the rice grains clinging to her chopsticks, she quickly realized why Ramai had lost. Is it because of the food? Because of the food. Seeing the puzzled look on Ramai's face, Yukihira-sama looked at Irina with a hint of admiration and said, "That's right, the reason you lost this time is because you made the same mistake as I did before." Chapter 428 Declaration of War from Irina. A donburi isn't just about the meat, it's the combination of meat and rice served in one bowl that's called a donburi. When using high-quality ingredients like rare and precious ingredients, the overly delicious meat easily steals the show. A donburi with simply delicious meat and mediocre rice is clearly not going to cut it. Like you, I was so focused on competing with you on meat that I overlooked this point. It wasn't until someone pointed it out to me that I finally realized it. My donburi uses frozen bison, seasoned simply with red wine and onions, and nothing else. As a rare ingredient, the texture and flavor of frozen bison are already top-notch. For this food battle, I put more effort into simmering the rice. After all, it's not easy to pair ordinary rice with super high-quality meat. Soma Yukihira spoke as he brought a wooden barrel to the stove and opened it in front of Meat-Mei and the others. As soon as the wooden barrel was opened, Ramai and Irina were immediately struck by a delicate fragrance. This aroma, besides the distinct flavor of rice, carried a sweet and sour note, along with a surprisingly fresh aroma. I cook my rice in a wooden barrel, which is what's called barrel rice. This way, the rice's aroma is fully developed. I don't use water, but rather chicken broth, pre-cooked with a little butter from frozen bison. That sweet and sour aroma you smell is due to this. Looking at the red particles in Soma Yukihira's hand, Rauma exclaimed in surprise. Plums. Yes, I added plums to the rice. Not only does it impart a unique flavor, but plums also whet the appetite, ensuring a good appetite. After Soma Yukihira had revealed all the answers, Rauma glanced at her garlic rice, then at Soma's rice with plum broth, and immediately lowered her head. She didn't lose unfairly in this Shokugeki battle. Setting aside the rice bowl battle for now, she overlooked the rice. The fact that her opponent put so much effort into the rice but only gave the meat a simple treatment, and that it was enough to compare to her meticulously cooked meat, meant she had already lost. Miss Arena, I'm so sorry, I lost this Shokugeki battle. Faced with Nakuma's bow and apology, Arena didn't even spare her a second glance. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the audience and slowly walked towards the Polar Star dormitory. As the youngest of the 10 greatest 10 in history, and possessing many accolades such as the God's Tongue and the granddaughter of the Tatsuki commander, Arena is always the center of attention wherever she goes. Naturally, his unusual behavior caught everyone's attention. It's you, isn't it? You were the one who gave Soma Yukihira the rare ingredients and pointed out his cooking problems, right? Whenerin Seiya, as Arena slowly approached Seiya, staring directly at him, in full view of everyone, Seiya, who had previously been relatively inconspicuous, naturally garnered everyone's attention. I think you must have misunderstood. Like Soma, my family runs a small restaurant. I'm a completely broke bastard. How could I possibly afford such expensive, rare ingredients? As for giving me advice, that's completely absurd. I'm just a passerby. Feeling the curious and questioning glances from all around him, Seiya felt a wave of annoyance. While he wouldn't be staying at Tatsuki forever, he didn't want to be constantly picked on by others while he was there. Seiya considered Soma Yukihira's public mockery at the opening ceremony to be sheer idiocy, a self-inflicted embarrassment. Can't you see how many people are already looking to cause trouble for this guy, even though he's only been at Tatsuki for a short time? Of course, as the protagonist, he needs some supporting characters and experience packs, which is understandable, but that's the story of the child of the plane, Soma Yukihira. Seiya just wants to keep a low profile. Seiya hasn't watched much of Shokugeki no Soma, but if he remembers correctly, Arena should be the heroine, right? Your script is about a love-hate relationship with a hero, so shouldn't you be provoking Soma Yukihira right now? What are you doing here? HMPH, it's okay to deny it. You're returning to Tatsuki for the upcoming residential training, right? And during this residential training, I, Arena Nakiri, will prove that I'm the best student of Tatsuki's class of 92. After declaring this, Arena gracefully turned around and left with her secretary, leaving behind a large crowd of shocked and somewhat confused onlookers. Did you just hear that? That ice witch actually declared war on that person. Who is that person? He looks unfamiliar. Is there such a person among the students of the class of 92 in Tatsuki? And the name Wnerin Seiya, why do I feel it's a bit familiar, idiot? He's the legendary special student who made the Tatsuki commander-in-chief come to visit him in person, and conquered the Food Demon King and the God's Tongue with his cooking. Arena has always been a superstar in Tatsuki Academy, and thanks to her, Seiya, who was just a little-known person when he first came to Tatsuki, has now become the target of public criticism due to her actions. Originally, the protagonists of today should have been Soma Yukihira and Mikumi, who were competing in the food battle, but Arena Nakiri's declaration of war, coupled with Seiya's legendary title of special student, instantly changed the male and female protagonists on the scene. That guy, Soma Yukihira, is like that. Arena Nakiri is also like that. Are all these male and female protagonists so damn competitive? And even if they want to decide the winner, they can wait until the residential training. Is there need to announce it in this kind of place? Arena and her secretary patted their butts and left, but Seiya was in big trouble. Many Tatsuki students were already curious about this special student. Initially, everyone thought it was just a rumor, but Arena's attitude towards Seiya just now clearly confirmed the truth of the rumors. It was well known that the Ice Witch was quite proud. The fact that she would declare war so carefully proved that this special student truly possessed the strength that Arena-sama valued. After Arena left, the Tatsuki students present, some out of curiosity, some with ill intentions, and some hoping to make friends, all headed towards Seiya. That guy Seiya always tries to show off no matter where he is. Damn it, Today is supposed to be my day to show off. The food battle between Nakumi and Soma Yukihira is over. Originally, Soma Yukihira wanted to slap the faces of those who didn't think highly of him, but now he found that no one at the scene seemed to care because their focus had shifted. Chapter 429, Seiya becomes the Tatsuki hot topic. The legendary special student makes a surprise appearance at the Shokugeki competition between the transfer student and Nakumi. The ice witch declares war on the special student, and the battle for the top spot on the 92nd class of Tatsuki Academy begins. The untold story of the ice witch and the special student unfolds. Is it a tangled web of emotions? Or a moral decline? Tatsuki Academy is a wealthy academy, with even its own in-house publications regularly covering recent events. The Shokugeki competition between Soma Yukihira and Nakumi had been a hot topic at Tatsuki Academy, with Soma's face appearing on the front page that very day. Normally, with the Shokugeki competition over, and Nakumi's loss in the bet, joining the Donburi Research Club and becoming its president, these events would have made headlines the following day. After all, Shokugeki, food battle, competitions aren't common in Tatsuki, and Yukihira Soma's transfer student has been a hot topic. Nakumi is considered one of the most talented students in the 1992 Tatsuki class. Yet, even this highly anticipated Shokugeki competition didn't make the headlines the next day, instead being relegated to the sidelines. This is partly because most people in Tatsuki are unhappy with Yukihira Soma, and since he won the Shokugeki, they didn't want to hype it up, lest the already arrogant transfer student become even more arrogant. Another reason is that the special student and Ice Witch Arena are more talked about than the transfer student and Nakumi. No matter how talented Nakumi is, how could Arena, this year's top student and the youngest of the Tatsuki 10, be so impressive? Yukihira Soma, a transfer student, is relatively rare in Tatsuki, but Seiya is an unprecedented special student. Tatsuki Academy, Polar Star Dormitory, Dormitory 205. To celebrate Yukihira Soma's victory in the Shokugeki competition, everyone went to his dormitory for a party despite Marui Zenji's protest. It's worth mentioning that this time, in addition to the original members of Polar Star Dormitory, even Yukihira Soma's Shokugeki rival, Nakumi, and Kanishi Hirokazu, the former president of the Rice Bowl Research Society, were invited. Tatsuki Academy is the highest institution in the Japanese culinary world, after all. Why does this newspaper look like all those gossip-related peripherals? At the celebration party, Seiya looked at the newspaper that Sakuki Ryako took out with a look of annoyance on his face. He thought that because of Arena's actions yesterday, he would no longer be a nobody in Tatsuki Academy, but he never expected that things would escalate to this extent. Damn it, I should have ignored your life and death before going to Tatsuki Academy after the residential training officially started. Thanks to that Arena, Seiya had just arrived in Tatsuki and instantly became the most talked about person, replacing Yukihira Soma. Now, whenever he walks around Tatsuki, a lot of people will suddenly appear to ask him for information or challenge him directly. Although Arena is arrogant and willful, she has a large number of fans and admirers in Tatsuki with her superb cooking skills and God's tongue. The newspapers said so much nonsense, and those who didn't know would think that Seiya was going to secretly get married to Arena in a food battle. So it's natural that recently, some people, whether to gain fame, to help Arena vent her anger, or because they think Seiya is not good enough for Arena, have been looking for Seiya everywhere in Tatsuki. What's the big deal? Just stay in Polaris Dormitory for a few days, and this whole thing will blow over in a few days. But if I were you, I'd just defeat all those challengers. I've always intended to defeat everyone in Tatsuki and be at the top of the heap. Seeing Yukihira Soma, seemingly unfazed and constantly recommending his unconventional dish, shredded squid with peanut butter, Seiya smacked him in the head. That's easy to say, but do you know how many people out there are vying for a food battle with me over Arena? Fighting them all, wouldn't that be more exhausting than working in the shop? So, I'm not like you, always looking for trouble, so why does it keep coming to me? Ishiki K, after tasting Yukihira Soma's unconventional dish and offering an objective assessment, also served up her own. Seeing Seiya's dejected expression, he spoke up. Actually, not all those who want to challenge you are after Miss Nakari. Many are also motivated by their own fame, hoping to use you as a stepping stone. Tatsuki Academy is an elite culinary academy, so graduates are well paid in the workplace. The Tatsuki 10 are the best, and upon graduation, They can easily secure chef positions at prestigious high-end restaurants. But Tatsuki is home to more than just the Tatsuki 10. Students like Nakumai and Nito Hisako are exceptional students, just below the 10, and even enjoy considerable fame outside of school. As a highly sought-after special student, challenging you doesn't come with the same restrictions as challenging the Tatsuki 10. Furthermore, your abilities are currently based on rumors, not actual results. Your class's residential training begins in a few days. In previous years, roughly half of the students were eliminated from this training, so it's only natural that they'd want to take a gamble now. Seiya understood what Aishiki Satoshi said, which means that those who want to challenge him now do not have much confidence in the upcoming residential training. So he thought about making a name for himself before dropping out of school, so that he can be more easily accepted by high-end restaurants outside after being expelled. The price of food battles is very heavy, but they are already facing the crisis of expulsion. Instead of sitting there and waiting for death, they might as well give it a try. The 10 great masters of Tatsuki are not easy to mess with, and it is not easy to compete with them in food battles, so Seiya is treated as a soft person. The rewards for information on Seiya are very valuable now, and even I am tempted by it. Reward for information. Yoshino Yuki's sudden words once again made Seiya look questionable. Someone is offering a reward for information about you, about your background, whether you are the eldest son of a culinary family, what kind of relationship you have with the Rinanakiri, and so on. Some people are even offering rare ingredients as a reward to dig out some of your private information. After hearing Yoshino Yuki's explanation, Seiya was instantly speechless. He now suspected that he had entered not a culinary school, but a gossip paparazzi school. Damn, I think it's a bit watered down, but it's like this as soon as the code is opened. I am also helpless. Chapter 430, Tatsuki Residential Training begins. Tatsuki's survival of the fittest makes this place more like a small society than an academy. There are students here who truly love cooking and devote themselves to its study, but there are also many who only use it as a means to make money and become a social elite. To have earned the respect of Arena Nakiri and the favor of the Tatsuki Commander-in-Chief demonstrates your ability. Add to that the financial resources available to freely provide high-quality and rare ingredients to support your friends in their food battles, and it's no surprise they consider you a descendant of a renowned culinary family. Those who offer a bounty for information on you don't necessarily want to use you as a stepping stone to defeat you. Many of them likely want to learn about your background and curry favor with you. Even many of the girls might be here hoping to flirt with you. After all, Seiya, you're quite good-looking, aren't you? After hearing Aishiki-K's words, no one present, save Seiya and Soma Yukihira, showed any signs of surprise. Not even the adorably sexy Megumi Tadakoro and the energetic Yunuki Yoshino. This is Tatsuki Academy, a place where the strong prey on the weak. Compared to ordinary academies, the students here are much more mature than their peers due to their upbringing and other factors. Everyone present, except Seiya and Soma Yukihira, had graduated from Tatsuki's middle school, so they'd seen it so often that they were no longer surprised. It's a pity those girls who want to curry favor with the powerful and throw themselves at the men's expense will probably be disappointed. My family may be considered a culinary family, but unfortunately, it's a fallen one. And I'm not the son of a wealthy consortium. My family is just an ordinary chef who runs a small restaurant. Hearing Seiya's self-deprecating remarks, the people in Polar Star Dormitory, who already knew his background, were not surprised. However, the meat-loving girls who had been invited to the banquet looked surprised. Mr. Wenrun, your family only runs a public restaurant? But if that's the case, how did you help Soma Yukihira find such a rare ingredient as frozen bison? You know, even our meat products, which has a certain reputation in the meat ingredient industry, can't easily find this level of rare meat ingredients. Regarding this, the other people in Polar Star Dormitory, including Soma Yukihira, were also very curious. And Seiya did not reveal the truth that he was a gourmet hunter, but took out the silver membership card of the Gourmet Chamber of Commerce and said, for some reason, I helped a big shot in the Gourmet Chamber of Commerce, so he gave me this membership card. Whenever there is a need, I can order rare ingredients from the Gourmet Chamber of Commerce at a 10% discount. Upon hearing Seiya's explanation, everyone present glanced at the membership card in Seiya's hand, their eyes instantly gleaming with a light that nearly blinded him. Being a VIP member of the Gourmet Merchants Association, with access to 10% off rare ingredients, was far more valuable than even the title of a consortium tycoon. Rare ingredients were expensive, but for most chefs, they were within their means. The main issue is their limited supply, making them unavailable to ordinary people without proper channels. They often had to be purchased at a premium on the black market or at auctions. Only 3 people or 3 organizations in Tokyo held VIP status as members of the Gourmet Merchants Association for exotic ingredients. Tatsuki Academy was one of them. However, even within Tatsuki Academy, the VIP status seemed even lower than Seiya's. To be frank, even if Seiya fell on hard times, as long as he held this VIP status, he would be treated like a guest of honor wherever he went. Even the titans of the food industry would willingly marry women from their families to Seiya to establish a close relationship with him. Shingaya, I didn't expect you to have such an identity. In this case, I won't be polite. In fact, there is a rare ingredient that I have wanted for a long time, but I have never had a channel to get it, and me. I will start residential training in a few days. I don't know if I can bring my own ingredients this time, but just in case, it is better to bring some trump cards. Before, everyone in Polar Star Dormitory thought that Seiya relied on connections to get the rare ingredients, so although they asked Seiya, they didn't really have much hope in their hearts. In order to avoid embarrassing Seiya, they didn't even mention it again. But now that Seiya has shown his silver membership of the Gourmet Chamber of Commerce, why are they still hesitating? Sakuki Ryako and Yoshino Yuuki, who are already familiar with Seiya, bluntly told Seiya about many rare ingredients they had wanted for a long time. As for the shy Tadakoro Megumi and Meet May, who just met Seiya, they were a little embarrassed at first, but in the end, they still couldn't resist the 10% discount on rare ingredients. Rare ingredients are hard to come by, and now you can buy them at a 10% discount. Where can you find such a good thing? Soma Yukihira, who has experienced the deliciousness and magic of rare ingredients, originally asked for it. But he quickly realized that with the high prices of rare ingredients, it seemed that even if there was a 10% discount, he couldn't afford it. A few days after Soma Yukihira's fight with Akumi Shakujiki, the first-year class of Tatsuki Academy's 92nd Senior Division, known as Residential Training, officially began. Everyone in Polar Star Dormitory, with the exception of Aishiki K, a year ahead of Seiya and the others, had prepared for this residential training. Seiya, due to Orina's declaration of war, had been holed up in Polar Star Dormitory for the past few days. As a special student, he could skip classes for exams, even if it meant important class activities like residential training. This unique advantage also made fellow Polar Star Dormitory member Megumi Tadakoro envious. She had been promoted to senior division last in the middle school division, and even receiving a D on a regular exam meant she was in danger of expulsion. Because of this, Megumi Tadakoro always felt a sense of trepidation during every exam. However, the Polar Star Dormitory members who had tasted Megumi's cooking knew that her cooking skills were actually quite good, even better than most of the students in Tatsuki. It's just because she gets nervous easily that she always performs poorly at critical moments, which is why she always gets low ratings. So in order to avoid being eliminated from this residential training, Seiya prioritized ordering a lot of rare ingredients for Tadakoro Megumi. The same dishes, when cooked with rare ingredients, taste better than those cooked with ordinary ingredients, which can be considered a physical cheat. Unfortunately, when the well-prepared Polar Star Dormitory and others headed to the meeting place to take the bus, they were informed by the Tatsuki teachers that all students were prohibited from bringing any personal clothing with them for this residential training. Chapter 431, The 10 Outstanding Graduates of Tatsuki. How could this be? Upon being told that the residential training program prohibited bringing anything other than personal clothing, including food and kitchen utensils, many Tatsuki students began to stir. The Tatsuki instructors offered a compelling reason, saying, "This residential training program is meant to test your ability to perform well on the spot. You're bringing so many things with you, are you really treating it like a vacation? Besides, not everyone has access to good kitchenware and ingredients, so treating all students equally is the most fair thing for you." Upon hearing the Tatsuki instructor's words, Tadakoro Megumi, who had previously felt emboldened by her impressive collection of ingredients, suddenly became somewhat dejected. After all, the rigors of the residential training program far exceeded the typical polite assessment. Based on her usual performance, elimination would have been a near certainty. In fact, many students shared Tadakoro's unease after being told they couldn't bring anything else to the program. In previous years, Important year-long events like these at Tatsuki often resulted in many students being expelled due to failing assessments. One year, over 900 students participated in the residential training program, but only a little over 500 returned. Last year, there were 812 first-year students, but only 76 made it to the second year. This wasn't without reason. This year, residential training wasn't the only year-long event. The so-called residential training program was just the beginning of hell. This year's first-year class at Tatsuki was much larger than in previous years, totaling 981. However, based on past promotion rates, only around 100 would make it to the second year. Upon arriving at the residential training program, everyone gathered in the lobby, where the instructors and judges were introduced to Seiya and the others. The students were thrilled to learn that the lecturers were all former Tatsuki 10 outstanding alumni. After all, to them, the graduates of the Tatsuki 10 were almost all-star students. And just when many students assumed that the lecturers and judges, being former students, would show some leniency to their younger peers, a bespectacled, cherry-pink-haired Tatsuki graduate among the lecturers suddenly pointed a finger at a hapless individual standing beside Seiya and said, "You're eliminated, you're out. Pack up and go back." Shinomiya Kojiro, the first of the Tatsuki 10 of 79, was the first Japanese recipient of the Order of Prideful. He owned a restaurant in France and was known as the Vegetable Magician. The extra was initially thrilled to be named by the former Tatsuki 10 leader, but upon hearing that Shinomiya Kojiro was eliminating him, his face paled and he demanded the reason. "You should have used hairspray, right? And it has a citrus scent. Using this pungent hairspray will cover the original fragrance of the food and affect your judgment of the food itself." Hearing Shinomiya Kojiro's words, the extra student was speechless on the spot. He wanted to refute him, but he couldn't find an excuse. Citrus-scented hairspray can indeed affect the chef's judgment of taste, but eliminating the other party for this reason was indeed a bit nitpicking in Seiya's opinion. After all, there are all kinds of smells in life. Putting aside the hairspray that only a few people use, most people use shampoo and shower gel. What about them? Don't they have any smell? Of course, Seiya didn't know the extra boy, and in order to not cause trouble, he listened attentively to the so-called star senior's talk. But perhaps the expression on his face was too indifferent, or his sarcastic aura was not turned off. After scolding the extra and eliminating him, Shinomiya Kojiro turned to look at Seiya and said, "And you, too, were eliminated. Seiya, you seem to disagree with what I said just now, right? As your former senior and lecturer this time, it's okay that you are disrespectful to me. But the main reason for your elimination is that you got too close to him from the beginning, so you had a strong smell of citrus hairspray on you. As a chef, you should be very sensitive to smells, but how come you didn't notice it for so long? This shows that you are not suitable to be a chef." After hearing what Shinomiya Kojiro said, Seiya, who had been thinking that it was none of his business and he was not concerned, just laughed at this moment. "Senior, former Tatsuki 10 elites, I have no problem with you wanting me expelled. After all, I never really wanted to attend Tatsuki in the first place. But I do have a different opinion on your rant. Pungent smells do affect a chef's sense of smell, but I believe a truly excellent chef should be able to adapt to cooking in any environment. He uses citrus-scented hairspray because he doesn't take cooking seriously and has a poor attitude towards it. But what gives you the right to assume that I didn't notice the smell initially? And that I can't be a good chef because of it?" Seiya's retort instantly made Shinomiya Kojiro's expression darken. He was a man with a nervous disposition and nitpicking when it came to cooking, and he stubbornly clung to his opinions. But now, he was being contradicted by a first-year brat. How could he tolerate this? "You are Wenrin Seiya, right? I heard your name from the commander-in-chief of Tatsuki." Shinomiya was indeed a bit picky just now, and even took his anger out on you, but as a lecturer this time, and there are seniors who are many years older than you, your words and actions just now were indeed rude. Let's just leave it at that. Just give me some face. Seiya didn't care too much about dropping out of school, so he didn't bother to argue with Shinomiya Kojiro and turned around to leave. However, just as he was about to leave, a figure in a suit, with a crew cut and an unusually burly figure, suddenly stopped Seiya. "Senior Dojima, Shinomiya Kojiro, who was a little unconvinced, wanted to say something, but under the strong aura of Dojima Jin, he finally chose to keep his head down and remain silent. The burly man before Seiya introduced himself. "My name is Dojima Jin, another former graduate of the Tatsuki 10 currently I'm the head chef at the Tatsuki Resort and a member of the Tatsuki Board of Directors. Wenrin Seiya, I've heard about you. It seems the Commander-in-Chief and Seiichiro are both very optimistic about you. I'm looking forward to your performance during this residential training. Are the Commander-in-Chief and his team exaggerating, or do you truly have the makings of a great talent? I'll see for myself. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 432, A Beautiful Girl with Great Tolerance Also Needs a Partner? Jin Dajima's words practically overturned Shinomiya Kojiro's expulsion of Seiya. While Kojiro resented this, since it was Jin Dajima's decision, he dared not object. As for the other top 10 graduates on the stage, after hearing what Jin Dajima had just said, they all looked at Seiya with curiosity. As fellow graduates of the Tatsuki 10, Jin Dajima was greatly admired by fellow former top 10 graduates like Shinomiya Kojiro, Mizuhara Fuyumi, and Inu Hinatako. Not only was Jin Dajima the leader of the 69th class of Tatsuki, he was the senior of all the top 10 graduates present and the highest scoring graduate in Tatsuki's history. After graduation, he made a splash by rejecting offers from 800 renowned restaurants nationwide to work at the Tatsuki Resort, becoming the pinnacle of all graduates. If the current Tatsuki students of the 92nd class were their fans, then they were also fans of Jin Dajima. I hope you can show as much skill in my class as you just talked in a good way. Otherwise, I will expel you as an instructor, and Dajima-senpai won't say anything. The farce ended there. Seiya's expulsion was retained thanks to Dajima Jin, but the extras who had previously sprayed citrus hairspray weren't so lucky. For this residential training, the 981 students would be divided into different groups and assessed by the top 10 graduates from previous years. Seiya and Soma Yukihira were both assigned to Group F, and their instructor was Hinata Inu. She was a graduate of the 80th class of Tatsuki, who once held the second place among the top 10 during the Tatsuki era. She was known as the Empress of the Mist. She looked like a Yamato Natashiko, but was said to be quite formidable. Hinata Inu continued the same grouping format from previous classes and assessed everyone. Students formed pairs and were tasked with preparing a Japanese-themed dish using ingredients they could harvest from the mountains of the residential training grounds. Although Seiya was a Tatsuki student, as a special student, he had never attended a regular class, let alone made friends with other students. However, since they were paired up in pairs, and he was paired with Yukihira Soma, Seiya initially planned to team up with his friend, his equally unpopular Tatsuki friend, only to discover that Tadakoro Megumi had already beaten him to the punch. Furthermore, before the exam even began, Yukihira Soma seemed to be arguing with the yellow-haired Takumi character. The protagonist seems to be surrounded by a lot of trouble. He seems quite troublesome. I'd better not join in on the fun. After eliminating Yukihira Soma, Seiya glanced around at the others, trying to find a suitable partner. However, Seiya soon noticed that those caught his eye turned their heads away or quickly walked away. Their reactions left Seiya bewildered. Logically speaking, he's at least a special student favored by the Tatsuki general in his group, right? Even if he doesn't have any actual results, he should still be better than a supporting role, right? It's fine if no one comes to ask for guidance, but why are they avoiding him like the plague? Did Yoshinouki and the others say he was a high-quality stock at Tatsuki, extremely popular? And that's how he turned out to be? They probably all think that you offended Chef Shinomiya in the lobby before, right? This time's instructor, Inu Hinatako, and Chef Shinomiya are both graduates of the Tatsuki 10 elites. And they have a good relationship. Before Sakuki Ryako finished her words, Seiya continued with a wry smile, so they are all worried about being dragged down by me. If this senior Inu Hinatako wants to help Chef Shinomiya vent her anger and deliberately give me an unqualified grade, then my partner will be expelled along with me. Tatsuki's students are really quite realistic. By the way, Ryako, are you also in Group F? Then you, before Seiya finished her words, Sakuki Ryako seemed to have guessed what Seiya wanted to say, and she ruffled her long violet hair and said, as you can see, I haven't found a partner yet. Since no one wants to team up with you, why don't we just make do together? And besides me, I don't think you have any other choice. As Ryako spoke, she turned to look at Tadakoro and Megumi, who had teamed up with Soma Yukihira not far away. Since everyone else is worried about being harassed by the other Tatsuki instructors because of Chef Shinomiya, whom I offended earlier, aren't you afraid of getting dragged down by me? Seiya himself didn't particularly care about being expelled, but if it meant getting in trouble with Ryako Sakuki, he'd rather go it alone. While the loss of one person might be a significant time drain, it wasn't a big deal for him, who worked so hard at the restaurant year after year. I believe the graduates of the Tatsuki 10 wouldn't deliberately give us juniors a hard time about this. Even Chef Shinomiya, I've heard rumors about him before. Although he can be strict, even nitpicky, he's incredibly serious and attentive when it comes to cooking. He would never do anything that would trample on a chef's dignity. And asking you to team up is unavoidable, since it's you who's left alone. Ryako's words also served as a reminder to Seiya that, due to their previous conflict, Chef Shinomiya might be tougher on him than on the others. However, if Seiya's cooking was truly up to par, Chef Shinomiya wouldn't do anything that violated his principles. Are you, like me, having trouble finding a partner? Seiya didn't dwell on Chef Shinomiya's identity. He was puzzled by how someone like Sakuki Ryako, a beautiful, well-built woman with a stellar culinary skills among the first-year students, couldn't find a partner in this situation. What's so strange about this? What I'm good at is fermented dishes, although dishes like natto and miso soup can also be considered Japanese dishes. But the ingredients for this kind of dishes are hard to find in the mountains, and they can't be made in a short time, right? In response to Seiya's doubts, Ryako turned her head aside and gave a reason that sounded innocent. However, in fact, in addition to fermented dishes, it was not a big problem for Ryako to make a Japanese dish to complete the current assessment. As for whether there is anyone looking for Ryako's partner, that goes without saying. Not only does there are, but there are quite a lot of them. After all, Ryako is a real big-breasted beauty. In addition, her performance in the middle school entrance examination is also among the best among the more than 900 people in this class. How could she lack a partner? Chapter 433, I am super strong in the food world, and I am also invincible in the human world. When assigned to Group F, Sakuki Ryako had originally considered partnering with Tadakoro Megumi. After all, working with someone familiar helped achieve greater synergy and efficiency in a cooking exam. However, after watching Megumi Tadakoro approach Soma Yukihira, Ryako gave a meaningful smile and decided to partner with a girl with similar academic performance. But soon, Ryako spotted Seiya, who was being avoided like the plague in the crowd. A smile quickly crept back on her face, and she politely declined the other's offer, slowly approaching Seiya. The Tatsuki resort was quite large, and while the ingredients there were inferior to more exotic ones, their quality far surpassed that of ordinary ingredients. When Seiya and Ryako reached the river, they found that the narrow channel nearly thronged with people. Instructor Inu Hinatako was testing them on how to harvest ingredients from nature and cook a Japanese-style dish within a certain time frame. Compared to hunting for rare game, stream fish is undoubtedly one of the most readily available staples for students. Hey, Seiya, you're here too. Come help. It's a bit tricky here. It's a bit too much for just Tadakoro and me. As soon as Seiya and Ryako reached the shallow end of the stream, they encountered Yukihira Soma and Tadakoro Megumi, who were also fishing. Tadakoro and Megumi had their trousers rolled up to their knees, and they, one on each side, tried to flank the fish, but they weren't always nimble enough to dodge them. The stream, less than half a meter deep, was so clear that you could even see the fish swimming through the water. While wild stream fish like these are incredibly delicious, catching them with bare hands is a challenge without tools. Yukihira Soma, being a boy and having helped out at the family restaurant since childhood, was in excellent physical condition. Women like Megumi Tadakoro and the pampered young men of Tatsuki were completely helpless against the fish swimming in the stream. Seeing Megumi Tadakoro's clothes soaked in breathless pursuit, Ryako, after taking a look at the fish swimming in the stream, took the initiative to take off her shoes, rolled up her pants, and headed out into the stream. The stream fish were quite agile, but due to the three people's pursuit, one unlucky fish was eventually caught by Soma Yukihira with his bare hands. In that short moment, Ryako and Megumi Tadakoro, now soaked and slightly breathless, understood why the previous group had abandoned the diving area to fish in favor of deep water. While the fish were clearly visible in the stream, catching such agile fish with bare hands was not an easy task. Furthermore, running in the water would consume even more energy due to the resistance of the current. Putting aside Soma Yukihira, who is a boy, After several fishing operations, Megumi Tadakoro and Ryako, who are of weaker constitution, have been a little exhausted. Ryako is even weaker than Megumi Tadakoro, because she has a huge burden that Megumi Tadakoro does not have. Every time she bends down to catch a fish, the influence of gravity will consume more of her physical strength. Until Ryako and Megumi Tadakoro were so wet that they even enjoyed the benefits, Seiya on the shore looked at the clumsy people and couldn't stand it anymore. You can't do this. You should observe the movements of the fish more, restrain your breath, and reduce your presence. Seeing that Seiya not only did not join their fishing operation, but also instructed them on fishing techniques with an attitude of giving orders, Soma Yukihira suddenly became a little dissatisfied. Observe the fish's movements and control your own breath. Is that even possible? Bang! A massive column of water splashed up in front of Seiya. Before Soma Yukihira could finish his words, Ryako and the other two watched in amazement as a struggling stream fish appeared in Seiya's hand. After accurately dropping the fish into a bucket on the shore, Seiya slowly walked to the area where the fish were most concentrated. Then, bang, 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 every time Seiya plunged his hand into the water, the powerful impact sent a massive splash. Soma Yukihira and the other two were reduced to stunned bystanders, watching as each time Seiya dipped his hand into the water and then emerged, a lively stream fish would appear. In just a few minutes, the bucket on the shore was so full of fish that it was overflowing. The Tatsuki students who watched Seiya catch fish with his bare hands were all stunned. If they hadn't just tried and failed, they would have thought the stream fish here were quite easy to catch. Seiya, how on earth did you do that? Looking at the overflowing bucket of stream fish, Yukihira Soma was devastated. The three of them had just wasted so much effort to barely catch one. And in the time it took them to speak, Seiya had already filled the bucket. That's why I told you, didn't I? Observe the fish's movements, and then, okay, stop talking. I get it. Sometimes I really wonder if you're even human. Putting aside your ridiculous reflexes, can a normal person reach out and catch a fish and create a splash several meters high? Glancing at the other Tatsuki student staring at him in astonishment, Seiya realized he'd gone a little too far. This was the human world, not the culinary world, where dangerous creatures roamed. His previous fishing skills were honed in the culinary world, catching the rare and insignificant puffer whale. But in the human world, his catch was somewhat shocking. Puffer whales are a rare and precious ingredient, with a catch level of 29. While inherently not particularly dangerous, their high catch level stems from their difficulty. Puffer whales typically inhabit the deep sea, only emerging into the shallows once every 10 years during their spawning season. Catching this rare and precious fish requires swift movement, killing the whale before it can react. Otherwise, the startled venom sacs in their bodies would rupture, rendering them worthless. Furthermore, removing the venom sacs from the puffer whales after capture was an even greater challenge. Back then, even Seiya, with his skill as a knife master, had to destroy many puffer whales in pursuit of this delicacy. A single puffer whale with its venom sac intact could fetch as much as 100 million yen. If the venom sacs were removed, the whale would turn golden, and its value would soar to 1 billion yen. Seiya had caught quite a few, but only managed to remove the venom sacs from 4. Unaware of their value, they all ended up in his and Minazuki's stomachs. Chapter 434, Seiya shows off his ultimate knife skills. That's enough fish for both of us to cook. Looking at the overflowing bucket of stream fish, Ryako and Tadakoro Megumi looked at Seiya with admiration. They hadn't expected Seiya to be so skilled not only in cooking but also physically. The difficulty of this project assigned by Inu Hinatako wasn't primarily the Japanese-style cuisine, but the added requirement of sourcing ingredients from nature. While the Tatsuki resort was rich in resources, the limited nature meant they couldn't use the farmed and cultivated ingredients available there. The shorter the time it took to gather ingredients, the more time they had to prepare the dishes. This was probably why Inu Hinatako had asked them to team up. After all, finding the right ingredients from nature and preparing them within the allotted time was no easy task for one person alone. At that moment, Ryako sincerely believed that her decision to partner with Seiya had been a wise one. Originally, she'd only seen Seiya without a partner, and out of consideration for her friend, she'd proactively sought him out. But she'd ended up being the one to be carried away. You guys take these fish and go ahead. I just found another good thing in the stream while I was fishing. So I've changed my mind and won't use stream fish as the main ingredient. Hearing Seiya's words, Yukihira Soma and the others were stunned. He was about to ask if Seiya needed help, but thinking of the physical prowess Seiya had just displayed, he quickly shut up. I've already decided on the dish I'm going to make. Since you don't need any help, we'll be leaving. While Yukihira Soma was curious about what new ingredients Seiya had found, time was limited. Besides passing the assessment, he also had to compete in a food battle. He'd already planned the dish, even going so far as to snatch the persimmon seeds from the instructor's hand as a snack. Changing the menu at the last minute was out of the question, so after thanking Seiya and the others, he and Tadakoro hurriedly grabbed their buckets and fled. Seiya's partner, Ryako Sakuki, was curious about what Seiya was referring to as a good thing, so she approached. However, when she took a closer look at the good thing in Seiya's hand, her anticipation instantly faded into a bitter expression. You mean the crab? Indeed, what Seiya was holding was a small crab with an unsightly wrinkled shell. While river crabs are common in lakes and rivers, or other crabs in the sea, river crabs are also found in streams. However, due to their smaller size, they are generally less prized. This wild river crab, when cooked properly, is quite delicious. Upon hearing Seiya's words, Ryako reached out to take the crab, only to discover that it was not only small but also rather unsightly. River crabs are delicious, sure, but these crabs are so tiny. Not only are they meatless, but the appearance of this crab is also terrible. Is this crab really any better than those stream fish? While we still have time, why don't we catch some more? Ryako initially thought the crabs Seiya had just caught were a unique case, but she soon realized that the crabs constantly being dumped into her bucket were all small and unattractive. These crabs aren't bad, they're just recently molting, which is why they look wrinkled. It's the perfect molting season for crabs here, and the dish I want to make requires just this type of crab. Hearing Seiya's explanation, Ryako quickly grabbed the crab from the bucket and, pressing it with her fingers, discovered that the crab's shell, which should have been hard, was surprisingly soft. Even so, Ryako was puzzled as to what dish Seiya was preparing that required him to select this particular crab. Crabs aren't like stream fish. While they're quite agile in the water, they're still much easier to catch. So, while Seiya was enthusiastically catching crabs, Ryako helped catch quite a few. Some Tatsuki students who hadn't caught any fish were also delighted when they saw Seiya and his friends catching crabs. They figured if they couldn't catch fish, crabs would be a good idea. However, when they finally caught some crabs, they discovered they were not only tiny but also soft-shell crabs in the molting phase. They threw them away with disgust. It was clear to them that even if they caught such crabs, using them as ingredients in a dish wouldn't pass the test. Ryako, since you specialize in fermented dishes, could you handle the dipping sauce in miso soup? When Seiya, Ryako, and the others returned to the cooking classroom with a bucket of crabs, Soma, Yukihira and Takumi, who was competing with him in a food battle, had already begun cooking. Besides crabs, they also gathered some wild vegetables and mushrooms on the way back, making a side dish of clear soup. This wasn't a difficult task for Ryako. But the point was, Ryako was incredibly curious about how Seiya would handle those small, soft-shelled crabs. I see, crabs. In fact, Ryako wasn't the only one paying attention to Seiya. Yukihira Soma and his instructor, Inu Hinatako, also turned their gazes towards Seiya. Yukihira Soma looked toward Seiya, partly out of curiosity about the good stuff Seiya had found by the river. And, being incredibly competitive, even though his food battle target was the yellow-haired boy named Katami, he also considered Seiya a potential rival. He'd lost to Seiya so many times before, but never had a chance to win back. Since arriving in Tatsuki, Yukihira Soma could sense his skills had improved significantly. With this rare opportunity, he naturally wanted to defeat both Seiya and Katami with his own cooking. As for why Inu Hinatako took notice of Seiya, the reason was even simpler. She was also very curious about what kind of dishes Seiya could serve, considering he was a young man who dared to contradict Shinomiya-senpai and even earned the respect of Dojima-senpai and the Tatsuki commander-in-chief. When Seiya first took the crab to the chopping board, everyone remained calm. But when Seiya used a sharp knife to instantly dismember the crab and, in just a few moments, removed all the crab meat and roe from the legs, everyone was stunned. Removing crab meat and roe isn't a big deal in itself. Even many novice kitchen helpers can do it easily. But the crux of the matter was, Seiya was simply too fast. Chapter 435, Exploding Seiya. Performing magic under the guise of cooking? The crabs Seiya and his companions caught from the river were small, so removing the meat from them was a time-consuming and delicate task. However, to everyone's disbelief, the moment each crab was placed on the chopping board and its shell and flesh were perfectly separated, it took only a few seconds. With each crab removed, a few flashes of the knife passed, and the fine, delicate pieces of meat were perfectly chopped out and placed on a plate nearby. In just a few minutes, Seiya had finished processing the entire bucket of crabs he had caught, leaving the others around him barely able to recover from their shock. Was he just performing magic? I didn't even see how he moved his blade. His hand even left an afterimage. Is that something a human can do? It must be just a show of force. We can't even see it all. Can the crab meat be cleaned cleanly? Even if it's not, it's still quite impressive. If it were you, could you do it? Seiya's skill in handling the river crab stunned many of the Tatsuki students present, including Seiya's partner, Ryako, and on the other side, Ketami and Tadakoro. Even Inu Hinatako, who had initially been merely curious about Seiya, slowly walked over to them after witnessing his skill and picked up a crab leg he had prepared. Just one glance and Inu Hinatako's face was instantly moved. The crab leg, thinner than a chopstick, was completely separated with a single, clean cut, and the crab meat was perfectly scooped out. There wasn't even a trace of crab meat left in the crab shell in her hand. In other words, Seiya's dazzling knife skills weren't just about speed, they were also about speed and precision. To perfectly remove these tiny pieces of crab meat in such a short time required not only speed and knife skills, but also exceptional vision. Inu Hinatako wasn't sure if her more skilled senior, Shinomiya, or even Dojima, could match her knife skills, but she knew she was no match for the young man before her. Seiya, you're incredible. How did you manage to remove all the meat from such tiny crab legs so quickly? Not only Inu Hinatako, but Seiya's partner, Ryako, also quickly noticed the meatless crab shell and exclaimed in amazement. Seiya simply curled his lips slightly in response, saying, "Nothing special, just perfectly cooked." Of course, our family's inherited knife skills are also impressive, compared to the stunned Inu Hinatako, Ryako, and the others. Yukihira Soma, who was also watching Seiya, didn't show much surprise. After all, it wasn't the first time he'd witnessed Seiya's incredible knife skills. However, since Seiya's dish this time was primarily based on crab, and the crabs were so small, it couldn't be sashimi. And as long as sashimi wasn't a dish that relied heavily on knife skills, Yukihira Soma still had a chance of winning. After removing all the crab meat, Seiya poured oil into a nearby wok and poured all the crab meat from the plate into the wok, adding chopped green onions, ginger, and other ingredients to stir-fry. Due to the high temperature of the oil, coupled with Seiya's incredible arm strength and wok flipping skills, a red flame quickly shot up from the wok. In the world of dark cuisine, there's a stir-fry technique known as explosion, but it's Yakin who excels at it. Seiya, the inheritor of Xiong'an and Ren's culinary skills, hasn't mastered this powerful explosion technique. While he doesn't possess explosion, he does possess a special trick. Subtly unleashing his flame power while flipping the wok, making it completely invisible to ordinary eyes. The flames danced and swirled, and Seiya, in the eyes of everyone, was like a fire mage. The extreme heat and precise control of the flames instantly preserved the crab's flavor and aroma. When Seiya returned the stir-fried crab meat to the plate, everyone present was stunned for a moment. The Tatsuki students present were also preparing their own dishes, eager to focus on their own dishes if possible. The problem, however, was that the noise Seiya made while cooking was simply too eye-catching and startling. If his previous display of knife skills was visible only to the stove near Seiya, then his astonishing pyrotechnics were visible to everyone in the entire kitchen. The flames soaring into the sky had many Tatsuki students thinking a cooking accident had occurred, but it turned out to be Seiya's showmanship. I suspect he's using cooking as a magic trick. Being a chef is just a disguise. His true identity must be from some magical otherworld. Brother, read more recipes and less anime girls. Is that magic? It's the pinnacle of pyrotechnics. When boiling oil hits a flame in a wok, it theoretically creates a visual effect of flaming, but it's a difficult pyrotechnic technique. And what he just displayed was like a feast of flames, such exaggerated knife and pyrotechnics. Is this the true power of Tatsuki's special students? There is no doubt that the explosive flame technique that Seiya just demonstrated directly stunned everyone present. Even Soma Yukihira, who had a certain understanding of Seiya's strength, felt even more pressured after seeing Seiya's explosive flame just now. But it is definitely impossible to let him admit defeat. The stronger Seiya is, the higher Soma Yukihira's fighting spirit will be. After serving the stir-fried crab meat on a plate, Seiya stuffed the crab meat back into the previous crab shell, coated it with breadcrumbs, and fried it in a pan. There is a way of cooking in Japanese cuisine, which is tempura that can fry anything, so the crab fight that Seiya is making now, coupled with miso soup and dipping sauce made of crab roe and crab brain, it is no problem to say that it is a Japanese-style dish. As the golden fried crab balls were pulled from the oil, a delicious, crispy aroma filled the air. After Seiya and Ryako finished arranging the dishes, many people present couldn't help but gulp at the sight of the dish before them. Although they hadn't eaten it yet, just by watching Seiya prepare it and the enticing aroma it exuded, they knew it was bound to be delicious. Chapter 436, Family Heirloom Crab Dish. By the time Seiya and Ryako finished their dishes, Ketami and Soma Yukihira had also finished plating theirs. In fact, Seiya and his team were the last of the three groups to return to the classroom kitchen, and judging by the cooking steps, it was clear that Seiya's dish took longer. Yet, thanks to Seiya's astonishing knife and fire skills, their group was the fastest to complete their dishes. Seeing the three delicious dishes laid out before her, Inu Hinatako looked at Seiya and his team with admiration. She had watched Seiya's cooking process closely, and even if she didn't eat them, she knew these three dishes would easily pass the assessment. However, she also understood that simply passing the assessment was too much for them to accept. The law of Totsuki Academy is based on the survival of the fittest. As a Totsuki student herself, she had fought her way through numerous competitors to secure second place among the Totsuki 10 elites. Therefore, Inu Hinatako fully understood the competitive spirit of Soma Yukihira and his team. Inu Hinatako glanced at the three dishes before her, and after a moment's hesitation, she sampled the Aldini brothers' roasted duck with pesto. This dish features a hybrid duck breast roasted with a mixture of soy sauce, mustard, black pepper, and honey, served with a Japanese-style green sauce of pickled ayu, green shiso, green onions, and yuzu pepper. The use of spices, seasoning, and roasting of the duck were all exceptional. As for Yukihira Soma's team, their dish was Yukihira Ryukakatane fried fish. This dish features river fish and eggs collected from the resort's forest, paired with kakatane that Inu Hinatako had snatched from her. The fried fish was incredibly crispy and had a sweet, persimmon-like flavor, a truly unique creation. Inu Hinatako also witnessed Yukihira Soma's remarkable imagination and innovation. In terms of flavor alone, the two dishes were equally matched, and both utilized the same principles in their ingredients. Hinatako Inu had said before that the ingredients used must come from nature, and the hybrid ducks of the Katami brothers were bred in the resort and raised in the forest. The persimmon seeds used by Soma Yukihira were even taken from here. Of course, both Soma Yukihira and Katami have proved their strength through cooking, and Hinatako Inu has also seen their talents, so she will not eliminate them because of such a small matter. But when asked about the result of the food battle, Hinatako Inu played a trick and said, "Wait until I taste the last dish before announcing the result. If the two of you can win over this Totsuki special student with your dishes, it won't be too late to decide who is better. After all, for you, there is no difference between second and third, right? What you care about is only who is first." Hearing what Inu Hinata said, Soma Yukihira did not refuse. After all, he had always wanted to compete with Seiya. After taking a look at Seiya, Katami also had no objection, because not only did he not accept Soma Yukihira, he also felt the same way about Seiya. Because he, like Seiya and Soma Yukihira, all came from mass-market restaurants. Although Katami had heard of Seiya's title of Special Student of Totsuki before, he did not take it seriously. Compared to Seiya, who only had a reputation, Katami was even more upset with Soma Yukihira, who clamored to step on everyone at the opening ceremony. But after seeing the knife skills and fire skills that Seiya just showed, Katami no longer dared to ignore Seiya, and he thought that the other party had such a reputation, and it was not unreasonable. Putting aside Arena Nakiri, Seiya Wenrin and Soma Yukihira, all came from mass-market restaurants. Katami felt that he would not lose to the two of them in terms of talent or hard work, so naturally he was unwilling to admit defeat at this moment. "Wenrin Seiya, is it okay if I call you Seiya-kun?" Inu Hinatako asked, smiling at Seiya in front of her. "Feel free to do as you please, senior." I'm more used to people calling me by my first name, while it's common sense to do as the Romans do. Even after all these years, Seiya still found it strange to be called by his last name, especially when he was with his stepmother, Wenrin Kingying. Actually, I've been quite interested in you for a while now. After all, it's rare to find someone who dares to contradict Shinomiya-senpai like that. You know, back when I was a student at Tatsuki, he constantly lectured me, but I never dared to retort. If my curiosity about you was merely curiosity before, then after witnessing your culinary skills today, I can only describe it as awe-inspiring. It's certainly not without reason that you're valued by the Commander-in-Chief and Dojima-senpai. Ahem, we've strayed a bit. Before we taste your dish, wouldn't you mind telling me the name? As Seiya prepared this dish, Inu Hinatako observed, scraping out the river crab's meager meat and stuffing it back in this way, which she found quite amusing. It's called kanitoto, a famous dish from the Magic City, a type of flour cuisine. It's one of our family's recipes, but I've refined it a bit. Kanitoto is actually the dish prepared during the duel between Ryan and Xiong-en in little cooking class. During the crab duel, Xiong-en's dish was the simplest crab steamed egg, while Ryan's was the crab duck Seiya is currently serving. Ryan's crab duck lost the cooking duel, but that was because Xiong-en used a technique known as tongue fatigue to influence the referee. Otherwise, defeating Ryan's crab duck would have been a difficult feat. It's worth noting that the same tongue fatigue technique Xiong-en used in the cooking duel is also used by Seiya, as his stepmother is the descendant of Yizhan King Xiong-en. This has always puzzled Seiya. Although both Ryan and Xiong-en wield the seven-star sword, they should be enemies. Why did their descendants and heirs end up together? Kibuto? What a strange name. Naturally, Hinatako Inu had no idea what was happening in the world of flour-growing cuisine a century ago. But while she found the dish's name a bit odd, it didn't stop her from giving Seiya's dish a high evaluation. The moment the golden fried crab she was dipped in a sauce made from crab roe and crab brain, and placed in her mouth, Hinatako felt a burst of crab flavor. As her teeth pierced the crispy coating, a thick, fragrant liquid burst out from beneath the crabashi. Chapter 437 Who is the first place? I don't need to say more, right? As she swallowed the crab, Hinatako's face flushed and she let out a moan. She felt as if she were wearing a cool swimsuit, frolicking in a mountain spring in the height of summer. As she dipped her beautiful legs into the cool water, tiny crabs slowly crawled up her long legs. As a graduate of the Tatsuki 10, Hinatako's resistance to drugs was much higher than that of ordinary people. This was evident from the fact that she had just tasted Soma Yukihira and Katami's dishes without experiencing any strange symptoms. However, when she tasted Seiya's crab, Hinatako took a single bite and felt as if she were immersed in a dreamlike experience, completely unable to extricate herself. The delicious flavor of the crab is tightly locked within the golden brown batter, and although the river crabs are small, their flavor is incredibly fresh and sweet. While the meat of larger crabs is firm and plump, the meat of smaller crabs is softer and more tender. Even more remarkable is that you've chosen crabs that are still molting, as these crabs have soft shells. So even after being coated in breadcrumbs and fried, they become crispy and delicious. The entire crab, from the meat to the shell, to the roe and brain used as a dipping sauce, has been fully utilized in this dish. As for that flavor that bursts in your mouth at the end, is it cheese? Indeed, Seiya's refinement of Ryan's original crab bowl dish was that he used breadcrumbs instead of fried rice, and added cheese to the crab bowl. Cheese pairs perfectly with lobster and crab meat, not only enhancing the dish's flavor and texture but also adding warmth. As we all know, fried dishes cool quickly if left out for too long, significantly diminishing their texture and flavor. However, cheese wrapped in the batter helps maintain its warmth longer, enhancing the crab's flavor. As Seiya explained, Hinatako finished off a large plate of kimchi with her crab roe sauce. Finally, after downing Ryako's miso soup, a look of satisfaction crossed her face. As the Tatsuki instructor for this session, Hinatako had been quite restrained. Much like Yukihira Soma and Katami's earlier dishes, Yukihira Ryukaki no tame fried fish and roasted duck with a green sauce. While these dishes were also delicious, Hinatako had only tasted them briefly. As the instructor conducting the class assessment, it was her duty to taste and evaluate the dishes of all the Tatsuki students present. Naturally, people's appetites for food differ when they're hungry and when they're full. When she's starving, she might give a barely acceptable dish a pass, but if it were placed last, she'd probably give it a pass. Unlike a two-person food battle judge, As the classroom instructor, she now has to eat everyone's dishes, so the one who serves the dish first naturally has an advantage. Of course, in this kind of classroom assessment, being able to serve a dish before others is part of one's skill. But this time, as the instructor, she should have followed the same path as Soma Yukihira and the others had with Seiya's dish, simply tasting it briefly to be fair to the students who came after her. However, Seiya's kanitoto was so delicious that Hinatako, uncontrollably, finished the entire dish on her plate. By the time she realized what she had done, her chopsticks were already empty, and she even felt like she hadn't finished enough. All three of you teams have passed this assessment. As for who came in first, do you still want to know? Hearing Inu Hinatako's question, Ketami snorted coldly, glared at Seiya, and declared, "Next time, I won't lose again." With that, he turned and left with his brother, who hardly resembled a twin. Since this wasn't the first time he'd lost to Seiya, Yukihira Soma didn't share Ketami's dismay. Instead, he looked at Seiya with a hint of resignation and said, "Seiya, have you secretly gotten stronger again?" He and Takumi had already noticed that their dish had lost, even without Inu Hinatako's announcement. After all, the expression on Inu Hinatako's face while she ate Seiya's food was distinct from hers. While most of their dishes still had most of theirs left, Seiya's was completely devoured, a powerful testament to his progress. Since arriving at Tatsuki, Yukihira Soma had felt he had grown considerably, and the gap between him and his supposed rival, Seiya, had narrowed considerably. But during this class assessment, Seiya once again proved his immense strength. Even without using rare ingredients like exotic ingredients, his masterful knife skills and magical pyrotechnics alone left most people in the dust. After the assessment, Seiya and the others returned to their dormitories. The members of Polaris Dormitory, after gathering, confirmed that none of them had been expelled from the school due to this first-class assessment. So, despite Marui Zenji's protests, they all went to his dorm for a party. Since it was the first day, everyone's dorm was clean, so it didn't matter who they went to. But everyone was used to having parties in Marui Zenji's room, and everyone in Polaris Dormitory knew that Marui Zenji was a germaphobe, so he would clean up afterward. Yuuki, you know what? Seiya was amazing during this class assessment. During the party, everyone explained the class assessment, including their group's experience with the instructor. When talking about Seiya's performance, Ryako suddenly became more excited than Seiya himself, and vividly described to her good friend Yoshino Yuuki how amazing Seiya's knife skills and firework skills were. The other members of Polar Star Dormitory all knew each other because they had been students of Tatsuki since middle school. Although Soma Yukihira had not been there for long, he had competed with Aishiki Satoshi and Mikumi, and everyone knew more or less about his strength. But Seiya, the only thing everyone in Polar Star Dormitory knew about him was the potato goulash he made when he first joined the dormitory. It was true that the dish Seiya made at that time tasted very good, but the rare ingredients added a lot to it, so everyone in Polar Star Dormitory never had a deep understanding of Seiya's strength. Chapter 438, Jin Hinatazi, Seiya is more powerful than you think. Although Soma Yukihira has always said that Seiya's cooking skills are very strong, and he has lost to Seiya more than once. However, Seiya is a big shot who can easily get rare ingredients. People in Polar Star Dormitory don't know whether Seiya used rare ingredients to defeat Soma Yukihira before. However, through the stories told by Ryako and Tadakoro Megumi this time, Yoshino Yuuki and Marui Zenji have a clue in their minds. The knife skills that are so fast that only after images can be seen, the fire skills that are like flame magic, and the dishes that even the top 10 graduates are amazed. No wonder Soma Yukihira always felt under great pressure before, and after coming to Tatsuki, he was completely relaxed when facing Aishiki and Nakari Arena. The current top 10 isn't this natural? With a genius monster like Seiya as a childhood friend, Soma Yukihira's ability to withstand pressure must have been maxed out since he was a child, right? A dish that even the top 10 graduates rave about, means Seiya is now capable of competing for the Tatsuki 10, right? Yoshino Yuuki's words reminded everyone present of the Shokugeki competition between Yukihira Soma and Mikumi, when Arena Nakari seemingly declared war on Seiya. Compared to Seiya, who wasn't one of the Tatsuki 10, Arena, as one of the 10, had a much simpler process for applying for Shokugeki competitions than ordinary students. However, if the Tatsuki 10 lost the Shokugeki competition, there would still be consequences. In other words, If Arena lost to Seiya, her spot on the Tatsuki 10 would be taken by Seiya. That's impossible. I've previously negotiated with Tatsuki's head coach, Shinzman Nakari. As a special student of Tatsuki, while I have some privileges not available to ordinary students, I'm also restricted in some rights. This includes not being able to become one of the Tatsuki 10, who hold considerable authority within Tatsuki. After hearing Seiya's explanation, Ryako, who was sitting next to him, couldn't help but show regret and said, "That's such a pity. I was thinking that with Seiya's strength, he would definitely have a chance to compete for a seat in the 10 best in his freshman year. In this way, our Polaris dormitory will have the second 10 best in Tatsuki, and if the rest of us work hard, maybe we can help Polaris dormitory break the record before we graduate. We can strive to have the largest number of 10 best in the history of Polaris dormitory. There's nothing to regret. I'm not too interested in a seat in the 10 best in Tatsuki. Students of Tatsuki might regard a place in the top 10 as the highest honor, but in Seiya's opinion, it's just that. If it were just a world view of food wars, Shokugeki no Soma, the top 10 of Tatsuki might be quite impressive. But the problem is that this world now also incorporates Cooking Master Boy and another high-powered food anime, and the so-called top 10 of Tatsuki seems to be just that. Tatsuki has nearly 1,000 new students every year, and there are 10 spots for the top 10. Picking one out of 1,000 may seem impressive, but compared to the flower-growing culinary world with a longer heritage and a larger population base, the gap is still quite large. After all, even in the dark culinary world that everyone hates, they don't want everyone. They only want those geniuses picked out of 10,000. Although he can't be one of the top 10 of Tatsuki. If Seiya has this kind of strength, he shouldn't be afraid to face Chef Shinomiya, who is very demanding in cooking. You don't know that the assessment instructor for our Group D today is Chef Shinomiya, and he is very strict about cooking. At the instructor's lounge at Tatsuki Resort, the Tatsuki 10 outstanding graduates who had just taken a hot spring bath, gathered together at the invitation of Dojima Jin, and started talking about the outstanding students in this year's Tatsuki class. It's just so-so. Generally speaking, although I haven't found any particularly eye-catching ones, there are some who are worth cultivating. This is what Fuyumi Mizuhara, who graduated from the same class of 79 as Kojiro Oshinomiya but ranked second, said. I have found many outstanding seedlings in my group, but the most amazing one among them should be the granddaughter of the Commander-in-Chief, Arina Nakari, who possesses the God's tongue. Oh, it's incredible. She has unique talents and is the youngest of the 10 outstanding graduates in history. It's really hard to imagine how far she will grow in the future. This is what Donato Wutongshin, one of the top 10 graduates of the 80th class of Tatsuki, said. Compared to her class, it can only be said to be average, but there are really quite a few people who are just filing in the numbers, so I gave quite a few people unqualified evaluations today. Hearing what Shinomiya Kojiro said, Donato Wutongshin and others also showed helpless bitter smiles. With their understanding of Shinomiya Kojiro, they can probably guess that the group that Shinomiya Kojiro is in charge of today should be the one with the most dropouts. What about Inatako? The group you are in charge of today has the most unqualified people. Don't you have any feelings about it? When all the Tatsuki graduates present heard what Dojima Jin said out of the blue, they all looked at Inu Hinatako in unison. To be honest, among the Tatsuki graduates present, everyone has always believed that Shinomiya Kojiro, who has always been meticulous about cooking and even a little neurotic, is the one who caused the most Tatsuki students to drop out this time. But what they never expected was that the Devil King was someone else, and it was Inu Hinatako, the person they least expected. You know, among the Tatsuki lecturers this time, Inu Hinatako should be regarded as the most talkative character among them. Everyone originally thought that the group she was in charge of should have the largest number of qualified people, but now Dojima Jin said that Inu Hinatako's group had more eliminated Tatsuki students than Shinomiya Kojiro's group. Hey, Hinatako, what's going on? In response to Mizuhara Fuyumi's question, Inu Hinata sighed deeply and said, regarding the group I'm in charge of this time, the reason why the most students failed was not because of my strictness, but because of that special student from before. Then Inu Hinata went on to explain the content of her class assessment and the dishes that Seiya had prepared. So, in other words, you were too greedy. After eating the entire plate of that special student's dish, you had no appetite for other dishes, so you gave the following students low scores. The Tatsuki graduates present couldn't help but be curious about what kind of dish it was that could make Inu Hinata eat so much. That's only part of the reason. Another reason is that when Seiya was preparing the dish, the noise he made was too loud, which affected many of the surrounding students and even caused them to perform poorly. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 439, Seiya in the Eyes of Tatsuki Graduates. Knife skills so sharp they leave after images, and firework that's like flame magic. Inu Hinatoko, are you sure you're serious and not joking? As Tatsuki's top 10 graduates, Mizuhara Fuyumi and the others have either opened their own restaurants or become head chefs at renowned establishments, arguably steeped in culinary expertise for years. While their specialties vary, they possess a solid foundation and fundamental skills. But even they couldn't reach the level of Seiya that Inu Hinatoko described, right? No, I'm serious. The degree of monstrosity of that child is far beyond your imagination. I used to think that Arina Nakiri, who has received various elite training since childhood and is gifted, is a monstrous one among the 10 greats of all time. But it was not until today that I realized that my previous vision was still too narrow. The talent and potential of that child Seiya are far above Arina's. Putting aside other aspects, just the knife skills and fire skills he demonstrated in the previous classroom assessment are enough to make me feel ashamed, and with a full stomach, I did lower my expectations of other students afterwards. But after eating that crab bowl, I really felt that the dishes made by students in the future would not even pass the lowered passing line. After hearing Inu Hinatako's evaluation of Seiya, all the Tatsuki graduates present were silent. Only Shinomiya Kojiro was stunned for a moment, and then he said after a long pause, I guess it's because before that kid's cooking, everyone else's cooking was mediocre, so you think his cooking is delicious compared to others, Hinatako? No, Shinomiya-senpai, it's exactly the opposite of what you said. Before I ate that kani todo, the food I ate made by Soma Yukihira and Katami were all quite excellent. I know you are a little prejudiced against that kid, but his cooking is really quite outstanding. Shinomiya Kojiro was a little annoyed to hear that Inu Hinatako, who he had always taught a lesson to when he was in Tatsuki, was now defending Seiya like this. Just as he was about to say something, Dojima-jin beside him touched his chin and said, Interesting, is that kid using this method to prove that what he said is correct? Dojima-senpai, what do you mean by this? As the star senior admired by the Tatsuki graduates, Jin Dojima had barely begun to speak when everyone's attention was drawn to him. However, Hinatako and the others were somewhat puzzled by his meaning. Do you remember what that boy said in the hall earlier? Only a chef who can produce excellent dishes, regardless of the circumstances, is a true chef. Hinatako recalled the scene and repeated Seiya's words. That's right. Now think back and consider the reasons why those students who failed your class assessments failed. The Tatsuki graduates present were all former top 10, possessing unparalleled comprehension and talent. Jin Dojima's brief reminder was enough to trigger a look of sudden enlightenment on Hinatako and the others' faces. That boy wasn't deliberately showing off his skills, he was using it to prove that he couldn't maintain a single-minded focus while cooking. A chef who is influenced by his surroundings isn't a truly good chef at all. In other words, he was using this method to tell Shinomiya Kojiro that a truly excellent chef would not be affected by the fermentation of citrus flavor. And a guy who is not good enough to begin with would perform poorly due to little environmental factor, even if it was not because of the citrus-flavored hairspray. After understanding Seiya's intention in the assessment, Shinomiya Kojiro left a sentence, arrogant brat, and then left angrily. When Inu Hinatako, Mizuhara Fuyumi and others looked at the back of Shinomiya Kojiro leaving, they looked at each other and sighed in unison. It seems that this special student is not a quiet one either. I don't know what will happen if he is really assigned to Shinomiya Senior's group in this residential training. Donato Wu Tuangshin's words had just fallen, and Mizuhara Fuyumi and Inu Hinatako on the side glared at him. Mizuhara Fuyumi and Inu Hinatako both admired Shinomiya Kojiro very much when they were students, and even had a good impression of him. And Donato Wu Tuangshin's appearance of watching the fun and not minding the trouble obviously annoyed the two powerful female chefs. I'm quite curious about the scene you mentioned. Dojima-jin's sudden words made Mizuhara Fuyumi and the others look surprised and said, Donato Wu Tuangshin is fine, but why do you, Dojima Senior, you also think I'm watching the fun and not minding the trouble? We don't mean that. It's just that with Shinomiya-senpai's temper, If he really gets into a fight with that special student, it might end up in a food battle, right? Then let's have a food battle. There's nothing wrong with chefs fighting for their own ideals, right? And maybe through this food battle, Shinomiya will understand something. That special student named Yunin Seiya has something that Shinomiya doesn't have. As for whether they will end up in an unpleasant situation, there is no need to worry about that. Shinomiya is just a little stubborn. Once they recognize each other, maybe they will become friends. Dojima Jin's words left Mizuhara Fuyumi and the others bewildered. The next day, when the remaining Totsuki students were divided into groups again, their worst fears finally materialized. Seiya, Soma Yukihira, and Megumi Tadakoro were once again assigned to the same group, this time with Shinomiya Kojiro as their instructor. It might be argued that Seiya had originally been in Mizuhara Fuyumi's group, but thanks to Dojima Jin's manipulation, he was reassigned to Shinomiya Kojiro's group. Kojiro's assessment for everyone this time involved handing out a recipe for a French dish called 9 treasure vegetable jelly. Although Seiya's specialty was flour cooking, Kojiro's recipe was incredibly thorough, with detailed instructions for each step. Making it a simple task for Seiya was straightforward. Students didn't have to forage for the ingredients themselves for this class assessment, but due to the limited availability of fresh produce, the high-quality vegetables on hand were quickly snatched up by the crowd. Seiya and Soma Yukihira, with their physical advantages, were naturally the first to grab the fresh vegetables. Seiya, in particular, possessed the god's eye, and in a short time, he collected 9 of the highest quality vegetables on hand. However, while Seiya and Soma Yukihira were making good progress, Megumi Tadakoro, who was always a step behind and had a weaker physique, suffered a bit this time. Chapter 440, in that case, let's have some food battles. Because this project didn't allow for team formation, Soma Yukihira couldn't bring Tadashi Megumi with him. By the time the adorable country girl realized what was happening, the only ingredients left were scraps of inferior food. The cauliflower, in particular, which had been left behind by the crowd, wasn't just of poor quality, it was oxidized and faded. French cuisine prioritizes presentation and aesthetics over taste. Using cauliflower with impurities like this in a French jelly wouldn't be a good idea in terms of color. Just as Tadashi Megumi was about to burst into tears, a figure suddenly stepped in front of her, snatched the cauliflower from her hand, and thrust several heads of excellent quality into her hands. Seiya-san, what are you doing? That's right, the person exchanging the good cauliflower for Tadashi Megumi's defective cauliflower was, of course, Seiya. Take it. The rules for this assignment only prohibit reminders or whispering, but they don't restrict others from exchanging ingredients. Seiya, sitting nearby, didn't intervene when he saw Seiya's actions. After all, he had deliberately placed the defective broccoli in the mix to limit the number of people who passed. Broccoli is easily oxidized, easily damaged, and difficult to prepare. A chef who loses their composure and doesn't realize this is disqualified. If someone else had tried to help Tadakoro Megumi by exchanging ingredients, Shinomiya Kojiro would likely have eliminated both of them. But hadn't Seiya said before? A true chef can create excellent dishes no matter the circumstances. This time, he wanted to see how they could overcome this challenge. Soon, thanks to their high-quality vegetables, Soma Yukihira and Megumi Tadakoro both successfully created the 9 treasures French jelly and passed Shinomiya Kojiro's assessment. When it was Seiya's turn to serve his 9 treasures French jelly, Shinomiya Kojiro, while impressed by Seiya's skill and the treatment of the oxidized broccoli, ultimately gave it a failing grade. Honestly, Seiya's 9 treasures French jelly was the best of almost everyone present, both in terms of taste and color. However, there was one thing that Shinomiya Kojiro couldn't accept: Seiya's French jelly, in addition to the sweetness of the vegetables, also had a slight sour taste. This sourness wasn't overt, and the subtle sourness made the 9 treasures French jelly even more delicious. The reason for Shinomiya Kojiro's failing grade was simple: his original recipe for 9 treasures French jelly utilized the sweetness of the 9 vegetables to complement each other. Seiya's alterations had transformed the dish into something else entirely. I originally thought you'd use white vinegar to bleach the oxidized cauliflower, but I wasn't expecting you to use lemon. Citric acid does have a bleaching effect, and the fresh fragrance of lemon complements the sweetness of the vegetables beautifully. Even I have to admit that your improvisational skills are quite impressive, but as I said before, what you're serving is no longer the 9 treasures French jelly required by the project. A disgruntled Soma Yukihiro was about to step forward to retort Shinomiya Kojiro's comments, but Seiya stopped him. Seiya chose not to refute Shinomiya Kojiro's comments. In fact, while preparing the dish, he had already discovered that treating the oxidized cauliflower would inevitably affect the flavor of the dish. Using white vinegar to bleach it would make the sour taste even more pronounced, and using the citric acid and lemons was the best solution Seiya could come up with at the time. Indeed, as you said, my 9 treasures French jelly is different from the recipe you provided, but let me ask you this, is this considered an excellent dish? Or, in Chef Shigen's eyes, only the 9 treasures French jelly made step by step according to your recipe can be considered an excellent dish? It's common for chefs to encounter various problems during the cooking process due to various force majeure. If someone hesitates when faced with difficulties and dares not try to make changes, then I can only say that such a person is nothing special. Chef Shigen, I assume that since you embarked on your culinary career, you haven't encountered many setbacks, right? And you only move forward step by step according to your own plans, right? So there is one thing I'm curious about. Once you reach the end of your original goal, can you still make changes? Or, as I said, will you stand still and hesitate? What Seiya said was not only to the point but also a direct psychological blow. After listening to what Seiya just said, Shinomiya Kojiro even clenched his fists. He wanted to say something to refute Seiya, but found that the words were on the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't open his mouth at all. Pa. After leaving these words, Seiya originally wanted to turn around and leave. After all, as Shinomiya Kojiro said, the 9 treasures French jelly he made, although an excellent dish, did not meet the other party's subject requirements. The other party could not break his own shackles, and Seiya was too lazy to argue with him. Anyway, he was just dropping out of school, and Seiya didn't care much. But just when he was about to leave, a burst of applause suddenly came from behind the crowd, and then Dajima-jin made a brilliant appearance with other Tatsuki graduates. Shinomiya, in terms of both talent and potential, you are one of the best I've ever met. But as this kid said, don't you feel that since you received the Presper medal and fulfilled your wish, you've lost your way, even stagnated? Since you both insist on your own ideals, why not have a Shokugeki competition? If you win, Seiya, I will revoke your expulsion as a member of the Tatsuki Board of Directors. But if Shinomiya wins, you will be expelled, and, before Dajima-jin could finish his confident words, Seiya suddenly interrupted, I'm sorry, Mr. Dajima, but I'm not interested in the Shokugeki competition you mentioned. I can probably guess what you're thinking. You simply want me to be the catalyst to help Chef Shinomiya break through his period of confusion. As I said before, Tatsuki Academy doesn't hold much appeal to me, and even if I were expelled, I wouldn't care. So I really don't want to waste my time using my expulsion as leverage in a Shokugeki competition. Just kidding. Dajima-jin wanted to wake up Shinomiya Kojiro. That was his role as a senior to look after his junior, but what did that have to do with Seiya? Why did the other party think that he would work for him for nothing? Chapter 441 Clues about a legendary kitchenware. You are too arrogant, kid. Hearing what Seiya said, Mizuhara Fuyumi, Donato Gratoda and others standing behind Dajima-jin suddenly became angry. They were all among the 10 best graduates of Tatsuki, and were proud of graduating from Tatsuki, but Seiya's words just now were somewhat arrogant. What do you mean Tatsuki has no appeal to them? You know, every year, there are so many students who want to enter Tatsuki that it's hard to get in. And for ordinary students in Tatsuki, it's not an easy task to find a place in the 10 best Shokugeki. Not to mention that Shinomiya Kojiro was once the chief of the 10 best graduates of Tatsuki. In terms of seniority and status, he is much better than the current Seiya. Shinomiya Kojiro's status in the culinary world, for the sake of Dajima-senpai, he condescended to compete with a student Seiya in a Shokugeki. But now it is Seiya who started to act arrogantly. Before Mizuhara Fuyumi and the others could finish their words, Dajima-jin interrupted them. He looked at Seiya seriously and said, I know you don't care about being expelled, but aren't you interested in the legendary kitchen utensils? As Dajima-jin finished his words, Seiya paused in his tracks, ready to leave, and turned to him in surprise. You have the legendary kitchen utensils. Ever since he learned that this world was not only the world of Shokugeki no Soma but also incorporated the worldview of Chef Boy, Seiya had been obsessed with the legendary kitchen utensils. After all, while the supernatural talents and rare ingredients in Shokugeki no Soma were impressive, They still fared far worse than the legendary kitchen utensils that rivaled the magical tools of the later stages. Seiya had already decided that, having already visited the food world, if his cheap mother didn't return by next holiday, he would visit the culinary world. On the one hand, he wanted to check on his mother, and on the other hand, he wanted to try to find the legendary kitchen utensils. However, what Seiya didn't expect was that he hadn't even returned to the flower growing and cooking world yet, and now he suddenly heard about the legendary kitchen utensils from Dojima-jin. Legendary kitchen utensils. 7,000 years ago, the ancient chef Shuri used fallen meteorites to craft 8 magical utensils. Each one is said to possess the power to transform decay into something magical. There's even a rumor that mastering all 8 utensils and cooking dishes together grants immortality. Because of their immense power, the legendary utensils were initially sealed in 8 regions of the flowering continent. Over 100 years ago, they were discovered by the god of cooking, Liu Anxing, who sought out various heirs. However, during the conflict between the light and dark culinary worlds of flowering, these 8 utensils were scattered across the world for various reasons. Naturally, I cannot possess such legendary utensils, but by chance, I know the whereabouts of one of them. If you can win the food battle against Shinomiya, I can share this information with you. Seiya was stunned upon hearing what Dojima-jin said. He had originally assumed the legendary kitchen utensils were still scattered across the flowering continent, but after hearing what Dojima-jin had just said, it seemed the legendary kitchen utensils were now even more widespread. However, after a moment's reflection, Seiya didn't find it surprising. After all, the legendary kitchen utensils first appeared 7,000 years ago, when civilization was at a very low level. Putting aside the question of whether the legendary kitchen utensils might have spread abroad, few countries in the world boasted a 7,000-year history. But things were different 100 years ago. Transportation was already highly developed, and since the legendary kitchen utensils had appeared, it wasn't impossible for them to have found their way outside the flowering cuisine world for various reasons. In fact, his family already had a legendary kitchen utensil, the gunlang pot, one of the 8 legendary kitchen utensils. It was originally owned by Yan Xian, the Wanderer, one of the 5 tigers of the dark cuisine world, but was eventually reclaimed by Liu Anxing and passed to the 7-star blade, Rain. The gunlang pot automatically processes any food placed within it, whether shredding or chopping, while fully preserving the original quality and nutrients. Since Seiya's family is the heir to the Rain family, this legendary cookware remains in their possession even after a century. Unfortunately, due to Seiya's previous poor culinary skills, Wenren Kingying never passed the gunlang pot to him, fearing that Seiya would be guilty of possessing the treasure. Ultimately, however, she lost the family inheritance. The legendary cookware you're talking about isn't the Tanlang pot, one of the 8 great cookware, right? Admittedly, the food battle chips offered by Dojima-jin tempted Seiya, but before proceeding, he needed to confirm whether the other party's clue to the legendary cookware was actually his own gunlang pot. The gunlang pot was currently in the possession of his mother, Wenren Kingying. If, after all this food battle, he'd only received this information, wouldn't it be pure folly? No. The legendary cookware I'm talking about is the Jade Dragon Pot, one of the 8 great cookware. You would ask this, is the kitchen utensil you are looking for actually the Tanlang Pot? Or do you have any clues about the Tanlang Pot? Talking to a smart person like Dojima-jin, Seiya did not want to explain too much. After all, the more he said, the more mistakes he would make. There are so many people flocking to rare ingredients, not to mention the legendary kitchen utensil of which there are only 8 in the world. Dojima-jin knew about the Jade Dragon Pot, but did not go to get it, which means that the place where the Jade Dragon Pot is located is very dangerous, or it is very difficult to obtain. But this is not within Seiya's consideration at all. With his current combat power, he can even be called the strongest in the world. As long as he knows the whereabouts of the Jade Dragon Pot, even if it is in the abyss, Seiya dares to go for a walk. I'll also accept this food battle. And I won't take advantage of you. If I lose the food battle, I can also tell you the information about the Tanzang pot. Hearing what Seiya said, Dojima-jin also showed a smile as if it was just as he expected. And the other people around, whether they were first-year students of Tatsuki, or the top 10 graduates such as Mizuhara Fuyumi, were all dumbfounded at this moment. Because they never dreamed that an ordinary conflict would turn into a food battle, and even the chips for the final food battle would be the information and clues about the legendary kitchen utensils. That's the legendary kitchen utensils. Although knowing the information does not mean that you can get the kitchen utensils, you can imagine that this kind of legendary thing, even if it is just clues and information, is completely priceless. Even most of the Tatsuki students only learned about the names of the legendary kitchen utensils, such as Ganlang Pot and Jade Dragon Pot today. Chapter 442, Food Wars Showdown with vegetables as the main ingredients. The Shokugeki competition between Tatsuki's special students and the Tatsuki 10 elite graduates was a highly anticipated spectacle. The stakes were information about a legendary kitchen appliance, a truly eye-opening experience for the Tatsuki students present. As more and more people gathered, Jin Dojima felt that the chaotic situation might hinder the performance of Seiya and Shinomiya. Regardless of the outcome, Jin Dojima didn't want the results to be leaked. So, with a quick gesture from the Tatsuki Resort's president, a high-end kitchen was cleared out for Seiya and Shinomiya's Shokugeki competition. As for the other spectators who had come to watch the show, Jin Dojima expelled them all. The only ones allowed to remain were Jin Dojima himself, along with Tatsuki graduates Mizuhara Fuyumi, Inu Hinatako, and Donato Gatoda. Seiya supporters, Soma Kaudara and Megumi Tadakoro, had been present from the start and were therefore allowed to remain. As for Ryako and the others who later learned the news and planned to come to Seiya's aid, they were even stopped at the door. When Seiya learned that he was going to compete in a Shokugeki food battle with Shinomiya Kojiro, with the stakes being information and clues about the legendary kitchenware, Arina was the most surprised. She hadn't expected Seiya to start a fight with a former top 10 before even confronting her. Arina was confident and proud, believing that with enough time, it would only be a matter of time before she surpassed Kojiro, the former top 10, and even Dojima Jin, the highest scoring holder. However, at this stage, she wasn't confident of even taking on the current top 10, not even Shinomiya Kojiro, nor even Tsukasa Ishii. As a fellow expert in French cuisine, Tsukasa Ishii greatly admired and respected Shinomiya Kojiro. Simply put, the gap between Arina and Shinomiya Kojiro was at least 1 or 2 Tsukasa Ishii. But Seiya had now become so bold as to directly challenge Shinomiya Kojiro, who was over 10 years their senior. Upon hearing this news, Arina was undoubtedly shocked and quickly rushed to the Shokugeki competition to try to stop this seemingly joke-like Shokugeki competition. She acknowledged that Seiya was a culinary genius like her, but they were still young and lacked the time and experience to accumulate. They were students of the 92nd class of Tatsuki, while Shinomiya Kojiro and his friends were students of the 79th class, a gap of at least 13 years. She and Seiya were only 16 years old now, almost twice the age and experience gap. How could Seiya win in this Shokugeki competition? It would be fine if his opponent was just some low-ranking character, but Shinomiya Kojiro was the top 10 of their class. Arina didn't care whether Seiya would be expelled. In fact, Arina herself had always wanted to kick Seiya out for his disdain for Tatsuki. But for the sake of her own dignity, she hoped that it would be Arina Nakari who would drive Seiya out of Tatsuki, and that she would defeat him in a fair and square manner through a Shokugeki battle. If Seiya were defeated by Shinomiya Kojiro this time, wouldn't Arina Nakari ever even have the chance to challenge Seiya in a Shokugeki battle? Unfortunately, Arina's status as the granddaughter of the Tatsuki general and one of the 10 great masters of Tatsuki was completely useless at this resort. It would be fine if it were just an ordinary student. But the one presiding over this Shokugeki battle was Jin Dojima, the head chef of the Tatsuki resort, a member of the Tatsuki board of directors, and the holder of the highest graduation score at Tatsuki. Even if Tatsuki General Shinzima Nakari were here, he'd have to show some respect to Jin Dojima. Arina's aura and status wouldn't hold a candle to a boss like Jin Dojima. In response to Arina's impolite request to interrupt the Shokugeki competition, Jin Dojima unilaterally overruled her, demanding that, considering Arina possessed the god's tongue, she either remain as a judge or leave and stop causing trouble. Ultimately, the ever-flexible Arina obediently chose to remain as a judge. Even with a look of resentment on her face, she glared at Seiya, revealing her resentment. Seiya's Shokugeki competition against Kojiro Shinomiya was centered around vegetable dishes, as Kojiro was known in France as the vegetable magician. As for their cooking styles, the two were left to their own devices. After all, if even French cuisine was restricted to Seiya, it wouldn't just be unfair, it would be sheer bullying. To ensure Seiya and Kojiro could fully compete, Jin Dojima even prepared all the ingredients at the Tatsuki resort. Before them lay a densely packed list of ingredients, alongside a vast array of vegetables and common ingredients. Due to limited space, Jin Dojima couldn't bring every ingredient here for Seiya and the others to choose from. The reason for this list was to indicate that the resort had all the ingredients listed, and if they needed anything, they could have it delivered to the kitchen immediately with just a word. Seiya glanced at the list and couldn't help but marvel once again at Tatsuki's wealth. Besides common ingredients, the list also included quite a few rare and exotic ones. While most of these rare ingredients were rare, Seiya had seen them in the Gourmet Merchants Guild's illustrated guide and weren't high-ranking, they were still quite impressive. For most ordinary chefs, rare ingredients are already quite rare, and Dojima Jin's ability to procure so many was a testament to his considerable skill. With such rare ingredients at hand, Seiya and Shinomiya naturally wouldn't resort to using common ones. Shinomiya Kojiro, in particular, was confident in his own abilities and didn't expect to lose to a high school freshman like Seiya. But the stakes of this food battle are too high. After understanding Dojima-senpai's good intentions for him, he also intends to show his strength and ensure that he will not let Dojima-senpai down. The rare ingredients chosen by Shinomiya Kojiro are cabbage grown in the vegetable paradise of the gourmet world and the breast of a hungry bird captured at level 3. Although hungry bird is a bird, its meat has a very chewy texture and is rich in pork belly with a gravy of high-quality Wagyu beef. As for the rare ingredients chosen by Seiya, they are giant cabbages, also from the vegetable paradise, and a five-tailed heron captured at level 2. The five-tailed heron is also a large bird of prey. Although its meat is a bit tough, it is extremely delicious. When this bird of prey grows 5 tails, its meat is at its most nutritious and delicious. Chapter 443 Sichuan Cuisine, Boiled Cabbage on the Ceiling. French cuisine emphasizes presentation and color. As fellow Tatsuki graduates, Jin Dojima and the others were already familiar with Shinomiya Kojiro's culinary prowess. Therefore, during the food battle, Jin Dojima and the others focused their attention on Seiya. Giant cabbages, considered a haven for gourmet vegetables, can grow as large as small buildings. The giant cabbages at Tatsuki Resort are only about 2 meters tall. Even compared to normal cabbages, these are truly enormous. Besides their deliciousness, the giant cabbage's unusual size also makes them incredibly difficult to handle. If you only break off one leaf at a time, the entire head will rot and die. Only by breaking off 2 leaves simultaneously can the entire head be fully separated. The intervals between leaves must be perfectly timed, otherwise the remaining cabbage will be wasted. For this reason, the heart of the giant cabbage is its most valuable and delicious part. While not as tedious as preparing a puffer whale, processing this enormous cabbage was still a time-consuming and delicate task. However, Seiya's method of handling the enormous cabbage immediately amazed Dojima-jin and the others present. Seiya, knife in hand, leaped high into the air, leaping over the 2-meter-tall cabbage. Then, with bursts of blade light, the air exploded. The next second, rays of light enveloped the surface of the enormous cabbage, and before the stunned eyes of the crowd, it blossomed like a lotus. Fierce Bull Blue Dragon Slash. This knife technique perfectly embodies the secret knife techniques of the dark culinary world, the ancient saying of butchering an ox. Even the massive buffalo could be butchered and cut apart in an instant, a skill also reserved for 7-star Blade Ren. Dojima-jin and the others were stunned when they saw the massive, 2-meter-tall cabbage instantly disintegrate and blossom like a lotus flower, revealing its crystal-clear heart. Although they had previously heard from Inu and Atako that Seiya's knife skills and pyrotechnics were exceptional, reaching the level of mastery, they had never imagined Seiya could be so skilled. They could quickly process a large, exotic cabbage, but they could never achieve the ease and speed of Seiya. This level of knife skills was no longer just impressive, it was simply terrifying. Holy crap! This kid is only 16? Has he been practicing knife skills since he was in his mother's womb? Mizuhara Fuyumi had initially thought Inu Hinatako had exaggerated Seiya's knife skills, but seeing what she saw now, she realized she had been understating them. After preparing the cabbage hearts for his own use, Seiya then took up the 5-tailed heron meat and, with dazzling knife skills, removed the skin and bones, completely separating the breast and legs. He then set up a large cauldron and stewed the 5-tailed heron meat, along with jinho ham, pork tenderloin, and other ingredients, before blanching them. Originally, this stew would have taken several hours of slow cooking, but Seiya secretly used a physical cheat to shorten the cooking process. Then, while the stew was still going on, Seiya added scallions, ginger, matsutake mushrooms, dried longan, and other spices to the spice bag. Once the blanched broth was poured out, Seiya added the 5-tail bones, the essence of the rare 5-tailed heron, along with the skeleton, along with the spice bag, and simmered them again for another lengthy period. During the second simmering, Seiya minced the scallions and garlic and simmered them into scallion ginger water. He then minced the breast and leg meat of the rooster, adding the scallion ginger water to form the base for the broth. Broth sweeping involves using the minced meat to absorb impurities from the broth. This broth sweeping process should be repeated several times until the minced meat completely absorbs all impurities, leaving the broth as clear as boiled water. This process not only absorbs impurities from the original broth, but also further infuses the flavors of the meat ingredients. While Seiya was completing his premium broth, NERvGear also finished his own dish, Joe Farci. Joe Farci is a French regional dish made by steaming various ground meats and vegetables wrapped in cabbage leaves. While pork tenderloin is typically used as the filling, NERvGear used the breast of the hungry bird, a rare ingredient, instead. It's filled with morels, asparagus, and foie gras sautéed in butter, then steamed with a mousse made from chicken breast, butter, eggs, and whipped cream. As a top chef, NERvGear clearly didn't make the same mistakes Soma Yukihira had made before. Even with rare ingredients, he expertly combined them. His Joe Farci dish, which earned unanimous praise from the Tatsuki 10 graduates, even the discerning God's tongue arena couldn't find fault with it. When Seiya's dish arrived, everyone was stunned when they saw a cabbage heart in the bowl before them. That's until Seiya approached with a kettle and poured water into the seemingly ordinary cabbage heart. The already translucent cabbage heart, now nurtured by the hot water, unfolded like a lotus blossom in a summer pond. The Tatsuki graduates present, including Arena, were no ordinary people. As Seiya poured the cabbage hearts, they could smell the rich, almost tangible aroma in the air. This is concentrated broth. But how do you make it as clear as water? Looking at the bowl of exquisitely clear broth soaked with cabbage hearts, Arena and the others might have mistaken it for just boiled water if it weren't for the alluring aroma. But through the smell, Arena and the others could clearly detect a variety of ingredients and flavors, yet the broth before them, seemingly, was as clear as water. This dish is called boiled cabbage in boiled water, a state banquet dish and a hallmark of Sichuan cuisine. While calling it a vegetable dish might be a stretch, the precious, giant cabbage hearts are truly extraordinary, and paired with this exquisitely clear broth, they complement each other beautifully. After scooping a mouthful of the clear soup from the bowl and adding the cabbage heart to her mouth, Arena, who possessed the god's tongue, was stunned. The exquisite flavor of the rare ingredient, the 5-tailed heron, and the sweetness of the giant cabbage were perfectly combined, and simultaneously exploded her taste buds. Chapter 444, The winner is decided. Seiya wins overwhelmingly. The moment the clear soup sipped, Arena felt as if she had descended into paradise on earth. Surrounded by mountains, streams, and towering forests, Arena felt a gentle breeze caress her face, and then, accompanied by a resounding cry, she gazed up at the sky and witnessed another unforgettable scene. A gigantic, 5-tailed bird, after passing through clouds, suddenly rose from the ashes, transforming into a gigantic golden phoenix. Its 5 tails gradually transformed into the phoenix's golden tail feathers within the clouds, and its feathers, bathed in flames, shone brilliantly, embodying the aura of the king of birds. After a resounding cry, the phoenix, reborn from the ashes, finally landed on a giant cabbage. The moment the phoenix descended, the seemingly ordinary cabbage, ignited by the phoenix's aura and flames, began a rapid transformation, transforming into a paulownia tree, radiant with the same golden light. Gazing at the phoenix, emanating a noble and sacred aura, Arena felt that such a divine bird could only be admired from afar, even a step closer would be a blasphemy. The arrival of the divine phoenix also bathed the land in a radiant glow of rosy light and holiness. Enveloped by the phoenix's sacred light, Arena felt a warmth well up throughout her body, even her fatigue instantly vanishing. When she opened her eyes again, she realized that everything had just happened was merely an illusion. Yet, the warmth within her remained. A phoenix descends from a paulownia tree, a mythical legend of growing flowers. As Arena gazed at the boiled cabbage before her with a look of astonishment, Dajima-jin, who sat beside her, put down his spoon and murmured. Clearly, she wasn't the only one who had seen the phoenix and the paulownia tree. The reactions of the other Tatsuki 10 graduates quickly confirmed this. After taking their first sip of the soup, The judges' faces were filled with astonishment. Clearly, they hadn't expected Seiya's dish to reach such a high level. What's that warming feeling? Inu Hinatako and Mizuhara Fuyumi tried to uncover the secret of the ingredients, but looking at the clear, boiling broth before them, they too gave a wry smile. It's some Chinese herbs? The two who simultaneously revealed the secret of Seiya's cooking were Dojima-jin and Arena. Dojima-jin was able to reveal it because of his vast experience and, as a chef, his skills surpassed those of Mizuhara Fuyumi and the others. Arena, on the other hand, was able to reveal the secret of the ingredients solely due to the sheer power of her god's tongue. Although Seiya had mixed some spice packets with Chinese herbs to soothe the mind and replenish the ki, the sweetness of the medicinal food itself was overshadowed by the spices and the aroma of the meat in the soup. However, Arena, possessing the divine tongue, was still able to taste it. Although Arena didn't know what the medicinal herbs Seiya had added, she could tell because her secretary, who had always been by her side, specialized in medicinal cuisine. The 5 judges devoured every single dish, whether Seiya's or Shinomiya Kajiro's. Dojima-jin distributed 4 coins to Arena and the others, telling them to place their coin on the plate in front of the winner. After explaining the rules, Dojima-jin took the lead and, to Shinomiya Kajiro's incredulous expression, placed his coin in front of Seiya. Dojima-senpai, can you please tell me where I lost? Of the judges present, Shinomiya Kajiro cared most about Dojima-jin's evaluation. To his surprise, the senior he admired immediately voted for his opponent. What a coincidence this time. Both you and Seiya chose ingredients that are considered rare and precious, vegetables and poultry. French cuisine emphasizes presentation and color, while exquisite, it lacks a certain warmth. Flower cuisine emphasizes flavor. While seemingly simple, it's rich in meaning and warmth. Of course, cooking styles vary by region and audience, so regardless of which is superior, your Joe Farsi is every bit as good as Seiya's boiled cabbage in both taste and texture. But your failure was a lack of consideration for the customer's experience. The customer's experience? But isn't it enough for a dish to taste good? Shinomiya Kojiro was still a little confused about what Dojima-jin said. Seiya-kun, is there any of your boiled cabbage left? Seeing Shinomiya Kojiro with a confused look on his face, Inu Hinatako looked at Seiya and asked. There is no cabbage heart left, but there should still be some clear soup left. After hearing what Seiya said, Inu Hinatako quickly walked to Seiya's pot and filled another bowl of steaming hot clear soup that looked like boiled water and walked it to Shinomiya Kojiro. Shinomiya-kun, drink this bowl of soup, and you will understand why Dojima-kun said that. Shinomiya-kun, do you cook for others or for yourself? Although I have always admired you, unfortunately, I will also vote for Seiya-kun this time. Arena was not familiar with Shinomiya Kojiro and the others, and her choice had been decided long ago. The god's tongue had already given the answer. So when Arena cast her vote for Seiya, the outcome of this Shokugeki battle was already clear. Seeing that the outcome was already decided, Mizuhara Fuyumi and Donato Gertoda also chose to abstain, which was considered to save the last bit of face for Shinomiya Kojiro. Although they all admired Shinomiya Kojiro very much, as a chef, they still had the minimum professional ethics. It was impossible for them to vote for the other party just because they had a better relationship with Shinomiya Kojiro. If the votes between Seiya and Shinomiya Kojiro were evenly matched, they would also cast their votes according to their own wishes. Seeing that the outcome was already quite clear, Shinomiya Kojiro also wanted to know where he lost, so he also picked up the bowl handed to him by Inu Hinatako and took a sip. The moment the clear soup entered his mouth, Shinomiya Kojiro immediately fell into the same illusion as Arena and the others before. Even though he was experienced, he also tasted the faint taste of Chinese medicine in the food. Cooking is to make people feel happy, not a tool to pursue fame and fortune. However, it seems that he has not considered the feelings of the guests for a long time, and only cooks for himself. Chapter 445, Seiya, a late-night cook? A dark culinary admirer? After taking a sip of the clear boiled cabbage soup, Shinomiya Kojiro stood there in silence for a long moment, until he finally walked over to Seiya and bowed his head, saying, I lost this time. Despite being a former top 10 chef and significantly superior to Seiya in both seniority and culinary standing, a loss is a loss. Shinomiya Kojiro didn't act like he couldn't stand it or try to deny it. Instead, he simply conceded and apologized to Seiya. Dojima-senpai, I'm sorry. I lost this Shokugeki, and you've suffered a loss. After apologizing to Seiya, Shinomiya Kajiro walked over to Dajima-jin and bowed again. Shinomiya Kajiro wasn't one to hold back. Even if he was asked to kneel down and admit his mistake, he would still honor his promise. The only thing that bothered him was that his Shokugeki defeat had cost Dajima-jin a huge loss. Even if it were just a clue, the legendary kitchen utensil was a precious treasure, not something that could be bought with mere money. And now, to help him discover his own flaws, Dajima-senpai had actually gone to such lengths. Shinomiya, I'm so happy to see you out of this predicament. Even this price alone is well worth it. Looking at the self-reproaching Shinomiya Kajiro before him, Dajima-jin let out a hearty laugh and patted his shoulder in comfort. Honestly, Dajima-jin initially thought that the Shokugeki battle between Shinomiya Kajiro and Seiya would reveal and enlighten Shinomiya, but he hadn't imagined Seiya would actually defeat him. The commander-in-chief had told him about Seiya, and at the time, Dajima-jin had believed that even though Seiya possessed considerable talent and potential, he still needed time to hone his skills. But after witnessing the Shokugeki battle, Dajima-jin realized that his previous assessment of Seiya had been too conservative. This guy is a monster. A monster even more terrifying than Arena Nakiri. The food battle was over, and Seiya's expulsion was naturally cancelled. Soon, he was called to a separate office by Dajima-jin. Although he won the food battle, Seiya did not mock Shinomiya Kajiro, nor was he happy that he could stay. After all, making sarcastic remarks after winning is the behavior of a third-rate villain, and Seiya will not do such things as making enemies like an idiot. First of all, congratulations on winning this food battle. Although Shinomiya has been in a state of stagnation after winning the Prosper medal, even so, Shinomiya's current level is still far better than most chefs in Japan. You were able to win the food battle with him, and your cooking skills have even completely surpassed the current 10 best chefs of Tatsuki. What do you think? Although special students cannot become one of the 10 best chefs, if I discuss it with the commander-in-chief, before Dajima-jin finished speaking, he was interrupted by Seiya, who was standing behind him. Stop, Mr. Dajima, I really don't have much interest in being one of the 10 best chefs of Tatsuki. Did you ask me to come here mainly to tell me the clues and information about the legendary kitchen utensils? Hearing what Seiya said, Dajima-jin sighed greatly. He had a similar idea to Nakiri Shinzeman before, that a genius like Seiya should be tied to their Tatsuki chariot if possible. Unfortunately, the young man in front of him was somewhat dismissive of the position of 10 outstanding students of Tatsuki that almost all other Tatsuki students were vying for. But Dajima-jin soon figured it out. At least Seiya was still a student of Tatsuki, and there were things that he was interested in, and that was enough. Although the clues to the legendary kitchen utensils were rare, with the power of Tatsuki, they could still find them. The legendary kitchen utensil Jade Dragon Pot actually comes in a pair, and as far as I know, one of them is currently in the hands of a local group called Late Night Cooks. The Late Night Cooks are some dark cooks who can use culinary abilities. They regard the people in the dark cooking world who fought against the god of cooking Liu Anxing as their idols, and each of them is quite powerful. One of the golden dragon pots is said to be in the hands of the leader of these late night cooks. And I'll give you another piece of information. The people who know this information and have their eyes on the golden dragon pot are not just you and me. The commander-in-chief's son-in-law, Arena's father, Nakiri Tsuki, has also set his eyes on this legendary kitchen utensil. Seiya had thought before, since it was a clue that Dajima-jin knew, then the golden dragon pot might be in Japan. Unexpectedly, although his guess was correct, the golden dragon pot has now fallen into the hands of a group of guys who sound quite troublesome. As mentioned before, Seiya has only watched the first season of Food Wars. Shokugeki no Soma, and because so much time has passed, he has even forgotten most of the plot. He had some inkling of Dajima-jin and the others, but as for the late night cooks, he'd never even heard of them. He did have some memory of Nakiri Tsukashi, a scumbag ghost father. It was said that when it came to Food Wars, they didn't have to cook, but Nakiri Tsukashi, that scumbag, must die. Speaking of late night cooks, since they idolize the dark culinary world of flower cultivation, would it be possible for him to infiltrate it if he revealed his identity as a descendant of that world? No, logically speaking, he was the only direct descendant of the 7-star blades, Rain and Xiongyan. If those late-night cooks were truly die-hard fans of the dark culinary world, wouldn't they bow down to him, seeing someone like him, a prince? Forget becoming a leader, wouldn't it be unreasonable for him to ask for a Jade Dragon hot pot? If Tatsuki knows anything about the whereabouts and clues of the late-night cooks, I'll let you know. After all, for us, orthodox chefs, those who have strayed into evil ways are also enemies. After keeping his promise and informing Seiya of the whereabouts of the legendary kitchen utensils, Dojima-jin also let Seiya leave. Seiya, who originally wanted to reply to Dojima-jin to withdraw from school, chose to shut up after hearing what the other party said. Indeed, although Tatsuki is now almost equivalent to Novice Village for him, it is difficult to gain experience here. But Tatsuki is rich, powerful and has connections. If he relies on his own strength to find the so-called late-night cook, who knows when it will take? Wouldn't it be better to let Tatsuki find it, and then tell him later? When he thought of this, Seiya felt that there was no need to quit Tatsuki in a hurry. Anyway, he was just a special student in name only. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 446 Final Assessment of the Residential Training. The Shokugeki competition between Seiya and Shinomiya Kojiro was a hot topic among the Tatsuki students. However, because Dojima-jin blocked the information, the curious Tatsuki students were completely unaware of the final outcome. Many saw Seiya, seemingly unperturbed, at the assembly hall on the third day and assumed he had won the Shokugeki competition. However, many disagreed, believing that Seiya had been spared by Dojima-jin and his team. While Seiya's culinary skills during the residential training were undoubtedly impressive, the idea that he could defeat Shinomiya, the former leader of the 10 greatest chefs and the first recipient of the prideful medal, was completely unbelievable. After all, the age and experience gap between the two was significant. For a special student to compete against the God's Tongue was already quite impressive, but defeating Shinomiya in a Shokugeki competition was simply impossible. HMPH, a bunch of short-sighted people. Instead of worrying about the outcome of others' Shokugeki, you should worry about whether you can survive the next assessment of this residential training. Aren't there quite a few people compared to the first day? The person who spoke with such arrogance and pride, and who appeared on the scene, was naturally Miss Nakari Arena. Honestly, yesterday's Shokugeki battle with Seiya had hit her harder than she'd imagined. She'd always considered Seiya a formidable opponent, but she hadn't imagined that this rival would be so incredibly strong, even defeating Shinomiya-senpai, whom she'd thought unbeatable. Even so, Arena wouldn't give up so easily. Since she couldn't win in a head-on Shokugeki, she'd just defeat Seiya in the assessment. She'd already inquired, and she knew that this residential training had already had 3 assessments. Seiya had received the highest A grade in Hinatako-senpai's classroom assessment. He'd also received an A grade for preparing 50 dishes for those who exercised. However, during Shinomiya-senpai's class assessment, Seiya had to change Shinomiya-senpai's recipe due to oxidized broccoli, resulting in him failing to complete the dish and ultimately receiving a D. Meanwhile, Arena had received the highest A rating and the highest score in each of the 3 previous assessments. In other words, as long as she could consistently outperform Seiya in the remaining assessments, she would be the winner of the residential training program. Arena knew this method of winning was somewhat of a psychological victory. But what could she do? Should she actually challenge Seiya to a food battle? In her old self, she might have had some confidence, but after watching Seiya and Shinomiya-senpai's food battle, Arena was completely utterly shaky. She'd spent the entire night trying to come up with this psychological victory strategy to convince herself. Now, upon waking up early in the morning, she heard everyone around her discussing Seiya and Shinomiya-senpai's food battle. Whenever Arena thought of that food battle, of that scene where the phoenix fell from the phoenix tree, she would be reminded of the huge gap between herself and Seiya now. Hearing Arena's anger, none of the Tatsuki students present dared to challenge her, instead choosing to disperse in silence. After all, while Arena's words might have been a bit arrogant, they were not wrong. They didn't have time to worry about the lives of others right now. If they failed the next assessment, they would be the ones kicked out of Tatsuki. After 3 rounds of assessments, the number of Tatsuki students remaining had dwindled considerably, and most looked exhausted. They had all put in a lot of effort to get into Tatsuki, and not everyone could be as indifferent to their Tatsuki diplomas as Seiya. Arena, don't think you can keep acting like a queen. I heard you declared war on those special students over there. Don't lose so badly, Obviously, many Tatsuki students are unwilling to provoke Arina, who has a full aura and a queen-like demeanor, but this does not mean that she can intimidate everyone. For example, at this moment, there is this beautiful girl with short white hair, eyebrows and eyes that seem to be somewhat similar to Arina, and she also has a proud figure. Facing Arina with her full queen aura, she is not afraid at all, and there is also a boy with black hair and a lazy face who directly confronts Arina. Alice Nakiri, the eldest daughter of the Nakiri family, is also Arina's cousin. A master of molecular cuisine, known as the son of the god of molecular gastronomy, a true genius, and one of the students in Tatsuki who is considered the closest to the top 10. However, although they are cousins, the relationship between Alice and Arina is quite ordinary. Both of them are geniuses in cooking, so neither of them will admit defeat to the other, and they are often even compared by others. However, Arina, at a younger age than Alice, had secured a spot on the Tatsuki 10, which made Alice consider her a formidable rival. HMPH, even if I lost to that Seiya, at least I was one of the Tatsuki 10, unlike some of those who almost made it. Arina, it had to be said that Arina's words were incredibly devastating to Alice. Just as the cousins' verbal dispute nearly escalated into a real-life brawl, Dojima Jin finally appeared and announced the topic for the next exam. This time, the task was no longer to pass a single instructor's assessment, but rather required all Tatsuki students present to serve the resort's guests, using eggs as ingredients and providing them with a buffet. Students who failed to sell enough food within the allotted time would be eliminated. Perhaps feeling that the workload was too heavy and that trial cooking would take time, Dojima Jin generously gave everyone ample time to prepare. Is the final exam in English? When Seiya and Soma Yukihira heard the test topic announced by Dojima Jin, they both turned to look at Arina. Because the dish that Arina had ordered when Soma followed Seiya to his restaurant before was in English. Seiya, and that damn transfer student, I will definitely prove with my strength that the winner this time must be me. Arina became very motivated when she heard that the final test of this residential training was a buffet with eggs as the ingredient. If it was other topics, it would be hard to say, but as for egg dishes, she had studied them for quite a long time before. In the food battle alone, facing the powerful Seiya, Arina was not very confident, but she was quite confident in this buffet format that allowed the guests to choose for themselves. Chapter 447, Seiya falls behind in buffet assessment. HMPH, if the exam is a buffet, then the preparation is quite extensive. It's not just a culinary competition, it's also a huge drain on the chefs themselves. Seiya and I have been helping out in our family's restaurant since we were young, so we're already used to this kind of intense work. I just wonder if you, Miss Arina, can handle it. Indeed, if they were serving ordinary customers, their expectations wouldn't be as high as those of the top 10 graduates who were instructors. However, this exam also had a challenge. Preparing enough food in a short period of time to serve a large number of guests was no easy task. Although Dojima Jin had given everyone ample time to experiment with dishes and prepare ingredients, once the exam officially began, facing a large number of guests would still leave many people feeling overwhelmed. However, Arina didn't mind this at all. Unlike most Tatsuki students, her rise to the top 10 wasn't solely due to her natural talent, she also relied on her unwavering dedication. While her physical strength, as a woman, might not be as strong as Seiya and Yukihira Soma, she was more than capable of handling this assessment. Even after Yukihira Soma's provocation, Arina retorted, "You two do own a restaurant, but it's just a casual eatery, right? The Tatsuki Resort is a luxury hotel. You're not planning on serving guests dishes like fried rice or omelets, are you?" Arina's words completely stumped Yukihira Soma, as he hadn't considered this issue before. The fact that this assessment was being held buffet style meant that the other Tatsuki students present were all competitors. The resort had a limited number of guests, and each person could only eat so much. Once a guest was already full, even the best of your dishes wouldn't be given a second glance. This meant that the final assessment wasn't just about the taste of the food, it also had to be innovative and appealing. This was precisely why Arina was so confident. While Seiya's culinary skills were undoubtedly impressive, egg dishes like three-no stick were too time-consuming to prepare, making them unsuitable for a buffet-style test. Furthermore, Seiya's specialty, flour-growing dishes, and the more accessible dishes of Yukihira Soma, simply in terms of presentation, couldn't possibly compare to Arina's meticulously crafted dishes. Observing the silent Seiya and Yukihira Soma, Arina quickly departed with her head held high, like a proud swan. Yukihira Soma, after a moment's contemplation, also bid Seiya farewell and hurriedly departed to test his own creations. Arina wasn't the only one. In this final test, Yukihira Soma, Takumi, and even Nakari Alice, all viewed Seiya as a potential rival. They were all first years, hailed as culinary geniuses, each possessing a certain pride. How could they possibly be willing to be inferior to others? Seiya had originally intended to just make some golden egg fried rice, but seeing the high spirits of Arina and Soma, Yukihira piqued his competitive spirit for the first time, and he slowly left to prepare his food. The next morning at 6 o'clock, a large number of guests streamed into the venue. Since there were hundreds of Tatsuki students taking the test, Dojima-jin had invited an unexpectedly large number of guests. In addition to the original Tatsuki resort guests, the guests also included resort staff and their families, Tatsuki's food suppliers, and many prominent figures in the culinary world. As the vast crowd poured into the venue, many well-prepared Tatsuki students began to prepare their own dishes at their respective cooking stations. People of all ages and backgrounds served as judges, and the Tatsuki students taking the test were required to prepare 200 dishes within 2 hours and present them with innovative new dishes. In other words, even if they could prepare meals for 200 people within the allotted time, it wouldn't be enough if they were just bland, ordinary dishes. This additional rule caused many Tatsuki students, who had been preparing cake dishes, to panic. When it came to egg dishes, cakes and egg tarts were undoubtedly the easiest to make and the most appealing. But Dojima-jin's additional requirement had effectively blocked their path. Of course, not everyone was flustered by this near-combat-like test. Some Tatsuki students excelled. Among them, the standouts were Takumi's Italian salad baked egg, Tadakoro Megumi's bite-sized oden, Nakumi's beef and egg rice bowl, and Alice's seemingly simple yet innovative egg set. Of all the Tatsuki students present, however, the one with the most customers surrounding the cooking table was Arina Nakari. There's no way around it. With titles like Youngest 10 and God's Tongue already in place, many of Tatsuki's guests, including prominent figures in the culinary world, knew Arina and flocked to her cooking table immediately. However, the long lines at Arina's table stemmed not only from her fame, but also from the fact that her eggs Benedict was truly one of the best dishes at the event. Atop a pancake, poached eggs and bacon, topped with a tangy hollandaise sauce, the dish itself looked as exquisite as a dazzling jewel, giving it an air of luxury. Buffet crowds often exhibit two key characteristics: herd mentality and a penchant for expensive dishes. With so many dishes on offer, trying them all is impractical, so choosing the ones everyone agrees on is a surefire way to avoid losing money. Given the same dishes at a buffet, it's natural to choose the most expensive-looking ones. Arina had a good grasp of the two major human weaknesses of the guests present, so at this moment, the largest number of guests gathered in front of her cooking table. Looking at the long line in front of her own cooking table, Arina turned her head and looked at the cooking tables of Seiya and Soma Yukihira not far away, and a smug smile suddenly appeared on her face. The dish made by Soma Yukihira was omelette soufflé. Although it tasted good, the appearance of the dish itself was no different from that of an ordinary soufflé, so the guests present did not seem to be very interested in it. As for the dish made by Seiya, it was 3-egg shumai. Chapter 448. Seiya has terrifying connections? Suimai is also a famous snack. Seiya's 3-egg suimai uses an egg and flour dough, and the filling is crab roe. The black gemstone-like granules on top are preserved duck eggs, also known as preserved eggs. A suimai made with chicken, duck, and crab roe is called a 3-egg suimai, while other recipes use a variety of ingredients. Seiya's recipe is made almost entirely of eggs, with the exception of a small amount of flour. Furthermore, preparing suimai for 200 people isn't difficult, but the results aren't as ideal as Seiya had hoped. Seeing Arina, frantically busy nearby, smirking at him, Seiya couldn't help but smile wryly. Seiya is confident that his 3-egg suimai is as good as Arina's eggs Benedict. Every customer who leaves this counter raves about it, a testament to this. The crux of the matter is that while the 3-egg shumai is delicious and innovative, its appearance can't compare to Arina's jewel-like eggs Benedict. Of course, Seiya's current performance isn't as good as Arina's, but among the many Tatsuki students, he's still among the best. At least compared to Soma Yukihira, who's been working for an hour and has only sold 10 dishes, he's doing quite well. That Arina girl is quite capable. She's a young lady, But she's cleverly grasped the psychology of the buffet crowd and used it to her advantage. If I had known this, I should have made sure I used it or used my knife skills to create something more visually stunning. However, things had come to a point, and Seiya couldn't afford to change the test-ish midway. Losing was losing, and Seiya wasn't one to afford to lose. While he didn't think his 3-egg swimai would lose to Arena's Eggs Benedict, he could create an advantage through the dish's presentation, which was itself a strength. As word of mouth spread, Seiya believed it was only a matter of time before his 3-egg swimai surpassed Arena's Eggs Benedict. Unfortunately, by the time his reputation spread, the test would likely be over, as it only lasted 2 hours. Yukihira Soma seemed to be turning around his declining performance by showcasing his skills, attracting more customers. Seiya could have outperformed Yukihira Soma this way, but he ultimately chose not to. After all, he had already met the required 200 test scores. He had only lost to Arena. If he continued to compete with Yukihira Soma for customers in this way, they would both be clowns. Brother Seiya, I just thought I was seeing things, but it's really you. Brother Seiya, are you also a student at Tatsuki Academy? But aren't you a gourmet hunter? Why? Seiya, who had been planning to just sit back and wait for the exam to end, suddenly heard a startled voice. Hearing the familiar voice, he turned to find a well-dressed young man, dressed in a suit, staring at him with a look of surprise. I don't know why the hell you're here, but I don't want too many people to know I'm a gourmet hunter. Yusaburo, whose mouth was covered by Seiya's hand, nodded repeatedly to acknowledge his understanding. When Seiya released him, Yusaburo looked at him with a look of disbelief. Previously, Yusaburo had always assumed that a master like Seiya was a professional gourmet hunter. But he never expected that his idol, besides being a skilled gourmet hunter, was actually a student at Tatsuki. Is this your cooking, Seiya? Can I try it? The Kashima family, a renowned Japanese culinary giant, has numerous collaborations with Tatsuki, so many of their employees, including Yusaburo, the Kashima family's eldest son, were among the invited guests. Seiya, this is amazing. It bursts in your mouth. This is absolutely the best shume I've ever had. I didn't expect you to be such a master chef, not just in your cooking. I'm truly in awe of you. Yusaburo hadn't had high expectations for Seiya's 3-egg shume, wanting to try it purely out of respect. But as soon as he took a bite, he was struck by how delicious Seiya's shume were. He had previously tried many people's dishes at the event, including the Eggs Benedict at God's Tongue, but Yusaburo could confidently say that even Arena's Eggs Benedict was slightly inferior to Seiya's in terms of taste. Yusaburo was the eldest son of the Kashima family. Although he had a somewhat playful personality, he was a prominent figure in the culinary world, and many in the room recognized him. His exaggerated expression, coupled with the fact that despite being older, he flattered the younger Seiya by calling him Big Brother, immediately caught the attention of many. Mr. Seiya, I didn't expect you to be a student of Tatsuki. I'm so happy to see you here. Yusaburo's unusual behavior had many people wondering who Seiya was that could command such adulation from the Kashima family's eldest son. But then, another figure emerged from the crowd, greeting Seiya, leaving many of the culinary luminaries present stunned. It was Tsukumi Hikaru, the president of the Gourmet Merchants Association. If Yusaburo Kashima, the eldest son of the Kashima family, is considered a well-known figure in the food industry, then Mitsuru Tsukumi of the Gourmet Merchants Association is a real big shot. Although the Gourmet Merchants Association in the human world is not as large as that in the food industry, for most people in the food industry in the human world, it is already an existence that they need to curry favor with. To put it bluntly, if you don't have a certain status and position in the food industry, you are not even qualified to know a big shot like Mitsuru Tsukumi. But Mitsuru Tsukumi, who many big shots in the food industry want to curry favor with, walked up to Seiya's cooking table with an excited look on his face when he saw Seiya in the venue. And looking at the excited and flattering look on his face, it was exactly like himself who had just tried hard to talk to him. What's going on? If it was just the eldest son of the Kashima family, it would be fine, but why is even President Mitsuru Tsukumi of the Gourmet Merchants Association so polite to that young man? Who is he? Chapter 449, Seiya makes a comeback. Is this the celebrity effect? Mr. Seiya, I never expected to see you here. Ever since we last met, I've been wanting to visit you in Tokyo. That's why I've been invited to be a guest at the Tatsuki Resort. I never thought you, Mr. Seiya, were as students there. It's truly astonishing, looking at Tsukimi Hikari, who approached with such familiarity and fawning. Yusaburo's face suddenly showed disdain. The bastard was even better at licking than him. If old Jin weren't here, his licking skills alone would clearly be no match for him. All employees, relatives, and friends of the Kashima family present, come over here and taste the sume made by my brother, Seiya. Tsukimi Hikari, who had been thinking of ways to get close to Seiya and try his chance to enter the culinary world and sell them the rare ingredients he hunted, was stunned by Yusaburo's sudden call. Soon after, when he saw the servings of 3-egg suimai in front of Seiya, he instantly understood Yusaburo's intention and shouted without showing any weakness, "People from the Gourmet Chamber of Commerce, come over here and gather." Tsukimi, old dog, you are so hypocritical. You haven't even tried Brother Seiya's cooking, and you let your people come over. If others see this, they will think you are helping to swipe tickets. But I am different. I have just eaten Brother Seiya's 3-egg suimai and I thought it was delicious, so I asked my employees to come and taste it. Being suddenly called an old dog, Yu Jianguang's face suddenly became a little ugly, but compared to being embarrassed, Yu Jianguang was more worried at the moment, in fact, whether Seiya would be angry about it. The rare ingredients that Seiya sold to their Chamber of Commerce last time not only made him a lot of money, but also made the performance of the Food Chamber of Commerce in their camp area this month far ahead of many chambers of commerce in the human world. The power of the Food Chamber of Commerce is huge, and its influence covers both the human world and the food world. And there is naturally not only one branch of the Food Chamber of Commerce in the human world. Master Yuma, what you said is not right. The reason why I asked my employees to come here without tasting Mr. Seiya's cooking is not to deliberately please Mr. Seiya. But I have confidence in Mr. Seiya's cooking. After all, Mr. Seiya's cooking skills have been recognized by many food hunters in the camp before. It is said that businessmen have very flexible brains. When Yu Jianguang saw that Seiya was not angry about Yusaburo's provocation, he immediately gave a very reasonable reason. Soon, when the people from the Kashima family and the Gourmet Chamber of Commerce all gathered in front of Seiya's cooking table, the two groups of people started arguing again. Any employee of my Kashima group who can eat more than 2 servings of suime will get a 10% salary increase for each additional serving this month. Since this assessment was conducted in the form of a buffet, there was no restriction that each guest could only eat one person's meal, or in other words, one person could only eat 1 serving. So when the people from the Kashima group heard what Yusaburo Kashima said at this moment, they were instantly excited. If you eat 1 serving of suime, your salary will increase by 10%. If you eat 10 servings of suime, wouldn't your salary for this month be doubled? Not to mention that the 3-egg suime that the young master asked them to eat is indeed delicious. With such a generous reward, even if this suime is a dark dish, they will swallow it with a smile. Facing the wealthy Yusaburo, Tsukimi Hikaru's face grimaced. He had never imagined that this brat would resort to such tactics to curry favor with Seiya. He'd really like to follow suit, offering financial favors, but while he had plenty, he couldn't match Yusaburo's wealth. The Gourmet Chamber's assets were undoubtedly comparable to those of a mere Yuma group. The point was, he was merely appointed president, the Gourmet Chamber wasn't his. Any Gourmet Chamber employee who can finish at least 10 servings of shume will receive a promotion and a raise upon returning to the chamber. As president, he held the power to influence job assignments. That's enough. From now on, each person is limited to 1 serving of 3-egg shume. And doing this will not only make me unhappy, it'll tire me to death. Seeing that the vicious competition between Yusaburo and Tsukimi Hikaru was getting more and more intense, Seiya hurriedly stepped forward to stop them. Are you kidding? Although the assessment did not restrict a customer from eating multiple servings of the same dish at the same time, if he goes on like this, what's the difference between him, Seiya, and a ticket-swiping person? Brother Seiya, I'm really sorry. I'll leave now and we'll talk later, Mr. Seiya, I was indeed inconsiderate this time. I apologize for the inconvenience caused to you. I will come to your house in person to apologize later. After seeing Seiya's genuine anger, Yusaburo and Tsukimi Hikaru finally realized they'd gone too far, and they hurriedly left. But even though they left, the commotion had still attracted the attention of many of the other guests. As mentioned before, Yusaburo and Tsukimi Hikaru were prominent figures in the food industry. Everyone had observed their deliberate attempts to curry Seiya's favor, whether out of curiosity or self-interest. After Tsukimi Hikaru and Yusaburo left, Many of the industry's biggest names in the food industry flocked to Seiya's cooking table and began exchanging pleasantries while tasting his sayame. It wouldn't have been a big deal if they hadn't tried it, but once they did, everyone realized that Seiya's 3-egg sayame, while not as visually appealing as the dishes prepared by many of the Tatsuki students, tasted it. Those who had tasted it were undeniably convinced that it was one of the best sayame in the entire venue. So the question is, was it because of his cooking talent that Yusaburo and Tsukumi Hikari were so polite to this young man before? That's right, the other party is so young, but he has such cooking skills. He is indeed a very talented person. But would Yusaburo and Tsukumi Hikari deliberately try to please this young man just because he is quite talented? After some tricks, although these celebrities in the food industry got nothing, which of the big guys who can mix in the business circle is not a shrewd person? Seiya's sayame is indeed delicious, and Yusaburo and Tsukumi Hikari must have their reasons for deliberately trying to please Seiya. No matter what the reason is, they don't mind doing Seiya a favor at the moment. So soon, these celebrities and big guys in the food industry also started a new round of calling friends. Chapter 450. Winning depends not only on luck but also on strength. After the culinary giants and their friends and family finished feasting on Seiya's sayame and left with piles of business cards, Seiya soon welcomed even more customers. The reason was simple. As mentioned earlier, buffet eaters tend to follow a certain herd mentality. With countless delicacies on offer, why did these culinary giants have a particular fondness for Seiya's 3-egg sayame? If the delicacies raved about by these giants, it must be truly delicious. Once the ordinary people in the venue had this idea, the situation naturally spiraled out of control. In just a few minutes, a line stretched out in front of Seiya's cooking table, sometimes exceeding 100 meters in length and growing longer and longer. It was a simple logic: the longer the line, the more passers-by would automatically assume the food was better reputed and more delicious. If it weren't for Seiya's own one-per-person limit, coupled with his exceptional physique and years of intense work at the restaurant, he wouldn't have been able to handle so many customers this time. Looking at the long line at Seiya's cooking table, the other Tatsuki students taking the exam in the venue had varying expressions. Takumi and Alice, who considered Seiya their rival, were naturally grim-faced. After all, their scores had previously been comparable to Seiya's. But now, with this flurry of activity, Seiya's results were sure to eclipse them. Seiya's friends, Megumi Tadakoro, Nakumi, and Ryako, had long since lost all desire to compete with him. While marveling at his monstrous strength, they were also delighted by his excellent results. As for Soma Yukihira, he wasn't sure whether to be happy or sad. He, who also considered Seiya his rival, undoubtedly shared the same frustration as Alice and the others, watching his steadily rising scores. However, because his cooking station was closer to Seiya, and thanks to Seiya's influence, he saw a significant increase in customers, so he finally didn't have to worry about failing the test. Honestly, Yukihira-sama's omelette souffle wasn't bad, but he'd caught on too late, and now it was clear he couldn't possibly surpass Seiya, Irina, and the others. If Yukihira-sama was feeling mixed emotions, then Irina was definitely the most frustrated person in the room. Her eggs Benedict had been leading the pack for the previous hour and a half, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say she had already dominated Seiya's performance. But no one could have predicted that, just as the test was about to end, a wealthy executive and the president of the Gourmet Merchants Association would suddenly appear. It wouldn't be enough for them to recruit their friends to help Seiya improve his performance, but their subsequent outrageous actions sparked curiosity among the guests about Seiya's cooking, allowing him to overtake her. She simply pushed herself, who had been straddling his face, back under him. The 2-hour test concluded, and when Dojima-jin finally announced the results, no one present was surprised. Seiya took first place with an overwhelming advantage, leaving a huge gap between him and second place Irina. HMPH, you were just lucky this time. I won't lose again next time. Remember that. Irina's heart was far more generous than Seiya had imagined. She didn't question or protest Dojima-jin's final results. Instead, she uttered a few harsh words in front of Seiya and left with her secretary. This victory over Irina was truly a stroke of luck. After all, if it weren't for Yuzaburo and Tsukumi Hikaru's tantrum, Seiya's comeback would have been difficult. Seiya had initially expected Irina, with her unyielding nature, to be unhappy with the result and even suspect Seiya of having a backstabber. But Irina, the young lady, was resigned to the fact that she had lost. Lost, she said, without further ado, and walked away with a harsh remark. Honestly, if Seiya had truly triumphed through trickery, Arena wouldn't have let him go so easily. But Arena knew that Seiya's victory over everyone else in this exam wasn't just a matter of luck, it was also based on true skill. Cheating was impossible, and the names Dojima-jin and his team had invited were completely secret. As for Seiya's comeback, it was thanks to the celebrity power of Tsukimi Hikaru and Yusaburo, a fact Arena couldn't deny. After all, her reputation as the god's tongue had attracted many customers this time. Arena had previously followed Seiya and knew he'd visited a camp near the Gourmet World. It was probably around that time that he met the president of the Gourmet Merchants Association and the eldest son of the Kashima Group. She had no idea why Yusaburo and Tsukimi Hikaru held Seiya in such high esteem. But as she'd said before, Seiya's victory wasn't just luck, his immense skill was also a major factor. If Seiya's three-egg shumei tasted mediocre, why would it still attract so many customers even after Yusaburo and Tsukimi Hikaru left? It's true that people tend to follow the crowd, but if someone complained that Seiya's food was mediocre, would the long lines still give up the venue's other delicious options for a mediocre dish? Obviously not. The reason the lines were so long was because Seiya's shumei were inherently delicious. And even if each person was limited to one serving, how could an average chef truly have the stamina and endurance to handle such a massive influx of customers? Remember, her Eggs Benedict was already far ahead. Even if there were enough customers, Seiya wouldn't have been able to catch up in the final moments if he couldn't keep up with the time limit. Luck is one thing, but capitalizing on such luck also requires skill. So for this assessment, Arena was convinced of her defeat, but it was only this time. After the end of this self-assessment, the residential training of the 92nd batch of students of Tatsuki was completely declared over. There were about 800 people when they came, but in the end, only about 500 people successfully passed the assessment. In other words, in this residential training, more than 300 people were expelled because of failure. And every year, Tatsuki holds similar project activities such as residential training, but not just this one time. This shows that it is indeed not an easy thing to study for 3 years in Tatsuki and successfully graduate. At the end of the residential training, Tatsuki also prepared a banquet for the students who successfully stayed, and the food in the banquet was prepared by Tatsuki's 10 outstanding graduates. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.